The school board meeting for January 24th, 2017 is now in session. We would like to thank all of you who are in attendance with us in person or watching the meeting from another location for investing your time and energy to join us. We appreciate and applaud your commitment to partnering with us in support of our schools, our students, our staff, and our community. While the board and Brevard Public Schools staff members are fully committed to doing our best to ensure excellence in Brevard Public Schools, we know that our success depends heavily on an engaged and committed community to work alongside us and help us to continually improve. Thank you for being active participants in the process. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mr. Craig?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Oh, Mr. Susan?
Present.
And Mr. Ziegler.
Present.
At this time, I would like to hold a moment of silence for members of our BPS family who have recently passed away. Jasmine Minari, an 11th grade student from Heritage High, Rajana Coons, a custodian from Transportation, and Shirley Wesby, a custodian from Southwest Middle School. Our thoughts and hearts are with their families and friends. This evening, Deborah Foley, Marketing Supervisor, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move further, I would like to offer my fellow board members the opportunity to recognize staff, students, or community members. Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you. I've got three. First, I'd like to recognize Deborah Foley, who was just up here. She received from the Melbourne Regional Chamber of Commerce the I guess it was a Chairman's Award for being an ambassador for that chamber for her intense involvement in the community. Thank you very much, Deborah, for that. I'd like to thank Dr. Theddy and Dr. Blackburn for sending out another memo about the importance of flag etiquette to all of our schools. Thank you very much for keeping that alive in Brevard Public Schools. And lastly, I attended the Level 5 Leadership Forum last week, and I was very impressed at the conversation that went on, and there was a topic that I wanted to thank you for that I'm sure we're going to hear more about it, and it's called organizational forgiveness. And I think that's just a great topic to let employees know that, okay, sometimes we make a mistake, but this organization is here to support you and forgive, because it's all about growing and working together. So great professional development for our future leaders. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a few, so I apologize, since it's been a while since we were here before Christmas. Before Christmas, I was able to go over to Cambridge Elementary, went to third grade classroom, Maureen Callahan's classroom. She did an amazing job with a party, but more important was just watching how she related to her students there at Cambridge. She gave out ornaments with a little picture of each student inside of them. To see the reaction of some of those students was truly amazing. So I know Dr. Smith is doing amazing work over there, but her team is fantastic, and I appreciated being there. Spent a morning with Jeff Arnott at the Adult Learning Center over in Clear Lake, and got to sit down with 6 students there. Just a great opportunity to see the breadth of students that attend that center. There was a lady from Columbia, another one from Mexico. There were students one from Vieira High School that was 2 credits shy of a diploma. They all had different reasons why they were there, but they were all passionate about finishing up their high school diploma. I know Jeff has some program expansion ideas that I think we're all excited about, looking forward to seeing how that works out and how we can get even more opportunity there. More importantly, though, for the rest of the board, I didn't realize that there was a graduation twice a year, and it's never been on our list. So I've asked Pam to put that on our list now, and I'd encourage each of us to look at that, and if we can attend those graduations, one in December, one in May, that we make sure that that happens as well. The ESF holiday breakfast. That was awesome. It was fun. I know it was right before Christmas. It was a lot of fun to serve everybody, but I think the star of the show had to have been Pam Escobar and her singing. It was awesome. Who knew? The other night, last night, Ms. Belford and Dr. Blackburn and I were able to attend the Cocoa football recognition ceremony over in Cocoa Riverfront Park. Max Prep's National Guard Award was given to them, one of the top 50 programs in the entire country. An amazing accomplishment for a great group of young men. Coach Wilkinson, Dr. Sullivan have done amazing work there, and I know Principal Wilson will do amazing work as well. So thank you to the Cocoa team, thanks to all the leadership there, and congratulations, definitely do. I got an email, and rarely do we get extremely positive emails, and that's okay. But there was one that came in this morning that was that kind of I think encapsulates just how great the district is going right now. There was a parents of a then kindergartner, now first grader at Lewis Carroll, that last year had some issues with their son and how he was progressing and how he was having some issues in the classroom. We worked with Dr. Thetty, and we worked with students with some others to ensure that he was evaluated, got the services he needed. And his father sent us an email this morning. It included the principal at Ms. Wade and the teacher Ashley Villarreal at Lewis Carroll, and just thanked us for how great his son has progressed now that they've identified the issues that he had, that his son is thrilled to be in school, he just loves reading, and he sent his report card just to show us that. So my hat's off to the team at Lewis Carroll, but it's just indicative of the passion and the true caring that our team gives. So thank you very much to them. And last but not least, I have to recognize a very good friend and pastor of my church, Corky Calhoun. He's in the back. Corky's here to recognize someone who will be voted on here in a few minutes. But Corky and his team at Georgiana do a great job in their partnership with Cambridge Elementary. They make a huge impact there. And I encourage any of you board members to go out and see what they do. I'd love it to become the business model for how a nonprofit or how a church gets involved with our school and makes a difference. So thank you for being here, Corky. It's great to see you. All right, that's it.
Ms. Deskovich?
Okay, for me, mostly I've been doing school visits, starting to introduce myself to all of the principals in District 3 and visiting the schools. And so a shout out to the ones I've visited so far, Mr. Kaminsky, Mr. Elliott, Ms. Bland, Mr. Fleming, and Ms. Hurst. Each of these principals I've just asked to stop in and introduce myself. And when I get there, it's a full tour of the school and their programs, and I've experienced the culinary arts at Palm Bay High. I mean, it's a gourmet kitchen in there, with bays and chef's hats on all the kids, and they're frying and flipping, and it's just impressive what our schools offer. I had such a limited view before this of schools that just my children attended, and so I'm thankful to them for opening the door, being so welcoming, introducing me to their teachers and what makes their school special. We've got some great things going on. Internally here, Pam, I know he already called you out for your singing, but our administrative assistant is amazing. She's so helpful to each of us, and I just think she deserves a special shout out. And then staff in general, Penny, Dane, Jane, Dr. Mullins, I depend on you a lot right now with a lot of questions, and I appreciate, no matter what the hour of the day is, that you answer my questions and my texts, and thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Susan?
The first thing is that one of the names of the individuals that passed was one of our teachers from before. He's already been recognized, but I was able to do his memorial service. He was actually my mentor, Peter Royo, and he was just an extra special person. But what I saw up at Space Coast was a family, and that whole cafeteria was packed full of people that whether they were teachers, whether they were coaches, whether they all from many generations going back 20, 30 years. And that culture of that group of people in there shows what we are as a school district, how much we get along, through the years, how this is a big family. It was amazing. The other thing is I got to spend 4 days in Escambia County to review an evaluation system that's way advanced past where we are and where we may want to take a look at. Not only are the teachers, administration, union, everybody working together with the district, but they all understood the entire evaluation system to a point where it wasn't intrusive and it was done the right way. Most phenomenal program, I'll talk about it a little bit later on. And the other thing is that on Monday was my last school visit to round out all my schools, and I will tell you, in general, some of the most amazing things that I've seen going on, and I'm so proud of what we're doing here in Brevard. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. I have just 2 that haven't already been covered by my fellow board members. One, I had the opportunity prior to the break to go to Coffee with a Cop at Mims Elementary, and I think it's donuts and something with, there's a new name that they have for the program, but basically what it boils down to is Sheriff Ivey and some of his team members went out to the school, met with the 6th graders, talked to them just a little bit about what they do in their roles in law enforcement and the different types of jobs that are available in law enforcement, talked to the students about leadership and that sort of thing. So a huge thank you to Sheriff Ivey and his team, because they always are phenomenal partners with us in education, and we're very appreciative. But the thing that I really wanted to call out from this event, Sheriff Ivey was asking the students, what does it mean to be successful? And the students were giving good answers, have a good solid job, have a strong family, own a home, typical success answers. And after several of the students had responded to that question, one of the students, Quentin Ciolfi, one of the 6th graders, raises his hand, and Sheriff Ivey calls on him, and he says, having a growth mindset. And my jaw dropped. So definitely have to give a shout out to Mims Elementary. Quentin's teacher that has been working a lot with him on that particular topic, Deneen Patrick, and certainly Quentin for engaging and absorbing that information and carrying it forward, because I think as a teacher, at least for me, I truly know that my students have gotten it when they're teaching it to others, and that was a perfect example of that. So kudos to them for the work that they're doing. And then, as many of you know, Astronaut High School faced some challenges last week with some threats, and just want to give a huge thank you to not only our law enforcement partners that were there to support and address the situation, also to all of our district staff that went out and assisted with the situation, certainly to Ms. Miller and her team, who handled things with grace and calmness, and did their best to keep the students safe and keep parents informed and keep everything running smoothly as it should. But I think also sometimes we overlook the impact to other areas of the district. For example, those students had to be fed, and so our food services staff had to get engaged and make sure that there was food available for the students. In that particular instance, it was brought in from a neighboring school who also had to jump into helping with the situation, housing fragile students, and transportation had to get involved to ensure that we could get students where they needed to go. And so it really was a whole team effort addressing that situation. And I just have to say a huge thank you, because despite the fact that I know there were parents that were a little frustrated that they weren't getting more information that they would have liked to have had, I couldn't be more proud of the way that everyone pulled together and ensured the safety of the students. So thank you. All right. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
Mrs. Belford and members of the board, on tonight's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, 1 recognition item, 3 proclamations, 1 presentation, 27 consent items, 3 action items, and 7 information items. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. There is a revision to item A6 on administrative staff recommendations. To the consent agenda, item F14 on student expulsions was added. Additionally, There are revisions to consent items F19 on instructional staff recommendations and F21 on school year calendar standards and the 2017-2018 school year calendar. There are 2 information item additions, H43 on job description for Director Compensation Services and H44 on job description for Financial Reporting Analysis, as well as a revision to the information item H49 on 5-year capacity plan and long-range capital plan.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. That was motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler, and approved 5-0. Dr. Blackburn, will you please let us know about the administrative staff recommendations?
Thank you, Mrs. Belford. On tonight's agenda, there are 9 administrative staff personnel members for the board to consider.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Mrs. Belford?
I'm going to open it as soon as, yeah. I forgot to do it right before. So we'll, when we go to discussion.
Okay.
Do we have a second for
Second.
discussion? Board members, we have 2 individuals that would like to speak to this particular agenda item. Since it is coming prior to public discussion, we need to, per Harold, give them the opportunity to speak to this agenda item before we vote. Is that correct, Mr. Beislein?
That's correct.
So at this time, I would like to go ahead and call our speakers up to the podium. I would remind you that the maximum allotted time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Clarification of information presented and answers to questions specific to district business and educational matters will be posted on the school board's website under the section called for the record. Please be reminded that profane, abusive, or slanderous speech is not permitted. I request that you speak into the microphone and state your name. Thank you. And our speakers are Dean Padarakis and Nick Tombolides. Dean, if you would like to come on up. No, it shouldn't. Pam, could you turn that so that Mr. Padarakis can see us? Thank you, sir. Will it turn?
I don't think you can turn it.
Really?
Well, okay.
Needs to turn.
Yeah.
Well, we need to get that other podium now.
That's fine.
Yes, thank you.
Happy New Year. My name is Dean Padarakis, former teacher, former school board candidate, parent, and generally anti-corruption citizen watchdog. I want to read an article that was written in the BrevardTimes.com dated January 15, 2017. After years of cheering for increased taxes and spending for Brevard Public Schools, minimizing million-dollar school contract scandals, and explaining away bad conduct committed by school board members, Florida Today's opinions editor, Matt Reed, announced that he is leaving Florida Today to take on a new role as head of Brevard Public Schools Public Relations Department, where he will be paid by the taxpayers to cheer for increased taxes and spending at BPS, minimize future scandals, and explain away any future bad conduct perpetrated by BPS board members and employees. The position pays approximately $110,000 per year, and Reed will be able to retire in 10 years above the same state pension level as a teacher who gave 20 years of service in the system. Reed's hiring still requires final approval by the Brevard County School Board at its regular meeting Tuesday, January 24th, 2017. The faces may change on the board, but the agenda of corruption stays the same. It didn't take long for Dr. Blackburn to fall in line with the policies that Bingley and DePatry followed. More misspending, more hiring of friends and family, and increasing salaries at the top for a job that could be done for less than what a teacher salary is. Is this his reward for not writing anything critical about Brevard schools after he complained on Facebook that his wife's job was in jeopardy. How do you think the teachers feel when they get only a $500 raise and he gets $20,000? I know that Matt Reed and Florida Today editorial all endorsed each one of you up there right now. But I encourage you to do the right thing for the citizens, for the children, and for the teachers. Please vote no to hire Matt Reed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paterakis.
Hello, good evening. Nick Tumbelides here from Suntree. Thank you all for your service to Brevard Public Schools. And I think that Mr. Paterakis' concerns about the Matt Reed appointment are actually legitimate. And you know, I work in politics, and what you see is that the character of political corruption has changed a lot. Gone are the days of the bag men who would deliver, you know, thousands of dollars in unmarked cash before a big vote. But the experts in this field say that you have to be on the watch for something a little bit different. They call it the gift economy. And the gift economy corruption works when people from outside the political system do favors for public officials, and then the insiders reciprocate with gifts of their own. So both sides reap a reward in that equation, but the taxpayer always loses. That's why I've come here also to oppose the appointment of Matt Reed. For years, Reed has used his media pulpit to advocate for official school board positions, such as a massive sales tax hike. When the board lost millions of dollars on a software fiasco that should have arguably destroyed some political careers, he thought that was much ado about nothing. So I think we should be wondering whether these were his opinions or his auditions. Brevard schools cannot be in the business of rewarding favorable coverage with appointments to plum government jobs. You just can't do it. This is the spoils system at its finest. It's a revolving door. It's everything that the real anti-corruption movement stands against. And so when you have these favors traveling in both directions, it's actually not good enough to say that you have no proof of corruption. The ethical standard that really matters is there an appearance of impropriety? And there is an appearance of impropriety here, I think, that creates an ethical conflict. But the most disturbing part of this appointment is the precedent that you will set by doing it. You're going to put a chilling effect on people who want to criticize you. You're going to put a chilling effect on reporters by showing them that softball journalism can result in a big payday here in Brevard. So I'm asking you, please keep our government ethical. Don't allow these conflicts of interest to enter into the schools, and please oppose the appointment of Matt Reed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that, I believe, opens for any discussion on the administrative recommendations. Mr. Ziegler.
Very interesting. So originally, to board members, I was going to ask that we break out the individuals separately for these recommendations because I need to speak to a procedural issue that I have a problem with. But being that there's so many, that would be too time-consuming. The appropriate motion would be to treat this item similar to a consent, where we pull an item for discussion but approve the rest. However, in the form of this motion, it would take an amendment to the motion to do that. What I'm getting at is that I had a request to speak to our candidate, Matt Reed, prior to approving him. I have no issue approving Matt Reed. And by the way, just for those of you asking us to do something, be aware what you just asked us to do is illegal. We, believe it or not, by statute, are not allowed to deny the superintendent's recommendation for hire. I get that sounds odd, but that's the way it works. However, I believe that it's the right of a board member to inquire, ask questions, and speak to whoever we want to speak to just to make sure we have a warm, fuzzy feeling. To do that appropriately and professionally, it should be done through the superintendent, which I did. There was suspect that maybe that's against statute. It's not. There was suspect that maybe that's not professional procedure. It is. I've spoken to city councils and other agencies that do this. Even though the appointment cannot be denied, I had even promised the superintendent that once I had this meeting, I would be supporting Matt Reed for this position. Interestingly enough, if any of you think through the types of people that are appointing to other leadership positions, for example, in a police department, if you have a drug enforcement agent, you usually want somebody that's been on the other side of the fence. They know how to do that job. If you are a bank manager and you want to secure your bank, maybe you want to talk to the person that broke into the bank. I think it's very appropriate that we want to be more proactive with our communications, our PR, that we have somebody working for us who knows the media. And to address some of the concerns of the speakers, and I just feel compelled to do this because I can do this, okay, minimizing issues with the school district. One of the things that Matt Reed has done over the years is he's dug in, he's done his research, and he speaks facts. You all may not believe it, but maybe if you took the time to dig in and research, you'd understand the same things. The things that you think are corruption, it's, you know, this is it's sunshine. Sorry, Matt, unfortunately, this is how we have to do things in the sunshine, but everything's documented, our conversations are documented. A little bit of research will prove a lot of different things. Anyways, the issue right now for me, I'm sorry, is that, and by the way, we are not allowed to abstain from a vote. Puts me in a predicament because to keep my promise to the superintendent, I would have to have met with Mr. Reed, had a little conversation, and then supported him. I cannot abstain from this vote. So I've got one or two choices, and I don't want this to reflect on any other candidates that are in this item here. I have one or two choices. I could either vote no, which I'd rather not do because that is really not what I want to do, but I'm not prepared to vote yes. So the other option would be to separate out Mr. Reed and to postpone the vote. Never done that before, but unfortunately those are my two options because of statute and because of procedure. Those are my only options right now. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve all of the recommended staff recommendations with the exception of Matt Reed, and we break that out into a separate vote. I will need a second to make that happen. If I don't have a second,
Are you calling a motion?
Well, no.
we have a motion. I'm amending the motion to separate Matt
We-
Reed out as a separate vote.
We had a, this microphone's going to make me crazy. We had a first and a second on the original motion to approve the administrative staff recommendations. Mr. Ziegler is asking for an amendment to the motion, which he would need a second on, and then we would need to vote on the amendment and then go back and vote on the original motion.
I can second that for you if you want to, I mean, if you want to pull that out for your own personal vote, I can support you
Please.
on that.
I don't want to impact the other recommendations at this point in time.
So we will take a voice vote on the amendment, Pam. All in favor of the amendment?
Wait, what's the amendment?
Amendment is to
The
separate
amendment-
out the vote for Matt Reed.
So we're voting on the administrative staff recommendations with the exception of Matt Reed. We will then vote on Matt Reed separately from the other administrative staff recommendations. Mr. Beislein?
That's if there's three votes to approve the amendment to Mr. Ziegler's amendment.
So a majority vote to approve Mr. Ziegler's amendment
Would be required
would be required,
to separate them out.
but we're just separating them out on this same
Just Matt.
agenda. We're
Correct.
not postponing the vote. We're
Correct.
just addressing them separately as we would with a pulled consent item.
Correct.
That's correct.
So am I correct in calling for a vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Since we have a.
Yes, you are. You got a second to the amendment, motion to amend the main motion. It would require 3 votes to approve the amendment.
So 3 votes to approve the amendment, and we need to do a voice vote for Pam. So all in favor of the amendment to the administrative staff recommendations?
Aye.
Hold on, let me unmute you all. Okay, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
And all opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the motion fails on the amendment, so then we go back to the original motion, which was to approve
Approve all.
the administrative staff recommendations. Correct, Mr. Bison?
Correct.
Can we still have a few more points of discussion on that?
We can still have discussion because we haven't called vote on the original motion.
Okay, because I just want to address our two speakers, because they do represent a few people in our community with concerns, and I can see how you have legitimate concerns. I just want to tell you from my point of view, first of all, Mr. Paterakis, Florida Today did not endorse me as a candidate, so this is not, my vote yes is not a payback to Mr. Reed or to what he has done in the past. Secondly, I've gotten emails asking if we saw the original candidates or if Dr. Blackburn has done this all on his own, out on a limb, and that is not true. He, from the minute he posted the position, he emailed us and texted us regularly and showed us all of the people that were that applied, and then narrowed that down and messaged us again with the people that were excluded because they were not qualified, didn't meet the minimum standards. He narrowed that down again by interviews. He walked us through the process, so there was transparency here. I just want the public to be aware of that before we vote.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich. Any additional comment? Oi. Any additional comment?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Ziegler.
Just to let them know the candidates, my vote of no is going to be to make a point on procedure, not a point of the candidates themselves.
And did you have a comment, Mr. Craig, before I comment?
I do, but it's not, yeah.
Would you like to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. Actually, my comment is I'm going to take it a whole different direction because, well, this is a great conversation. The fact is that our superintendent made a recommendation. He went through the official process of how to hire somebody using the job requisition process, did his interviews, and has done, I think, the best job. He's the superintendent. That's who we hired to make those decisions. They're direct reports to him. We hold him accountable if, in fact, those things don't work well. So I'm going to go beyond, and I'm going to say that I am thrilled to have the opportunity to vote on the next principal of Endeavor Elementary. And if I don't do it now, Ms. Mercer, it'll never happen. So I want to tell you how much it means to, I know myself, but to this community, to have you stand up and come back into our family and take over behind Principal Wilson and lead Endeavor. And so I wish you the best. You let us know what we can do for you, but welcome back. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming back and making an impact in our children's lives.
So you jumped the gun a little bit there, Mr. Craig, because we have not approved the appointment yet. But I echo your sentiments when we get to that point.
A privilege of
Nobody
being a
better
board
vote against
member.
her. I'm telling you. She's
Yes, so I will, do you need a voice vote on the original motion, Pam? Or can
No.
you move forward with the, okay. So at this time, I will call for a vote on the motion to approve the administrative staff recommendations.
It should be. We can only have
All right,
0
and the
within.
vote passes 4-1. Dr. Blackburn?
I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and recognize our newly appointed administrative staff members. And I see Deborah Foley ready to help me do that. First, I want to recognize Russell Cheatham for his reclassification and transfer from the position of Director, Management Information Systems and Security to the position of Assistant Superintendent in Educational Technology.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn, board chair, members of the board. Tonight I'm joined by my wife, Sarah, my mother, Sylvia, my son, Maxwell, Micah, and even my niece, Faith. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for the sacrifice and the commitment that you helped me make to the school board as we support our students. Secondly, I look forward to working with the board members, Dr. Blackburn, cabinet members, our schools. I cannot wait to make sure ET is engaged and collaborating so that we reach the fabulous goals that we're setting. Even with the opening of our medical center, I think we did another ribbon cutting tonight. Just so many excellent things going on in Brevard, and I can't wait to make sure ET is tied hand in hand, and we're moving forward together to make things great. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to say, are we still on?
You are now. No, you turned it off. Now you're on.
Okay. Next, I'd like to say congratulations to Matt Reed on his appointment to the Assistant Superintendent of Government and Community Relations.
Well, thank you, School Board, for your vote tonight. I want to also thank Dr. Blackburn for blessing me with this opportunity to serve. And although I haven't met them all yet, I want to thank the staff of Governmental and Community Affairs for a great head start on where we're going next. Applying my craft as a reporter, I've learned already that you have skilled people who really believe in what they do. You have some state-of-the-art media tools and some fantastic corporate partners who sponsor our communication and are willing to attach their brand to yours. We have some really promising community engagement programs, but best of all, and this was the reason why I was interested in this job and leaving a really good, hard-to-get media job that I will miss. You have thousands of students, teachers, and faculty and staff members across this county who have some great stories to tell about excellence and integrity. And you have a public that is ready to listen. So let's go. I start Monday, and I promise immediate progress. Thank you.
Next, we welcome and congratulate Mr. Rashad Wilson on his transfer and reclassification from the position at Endeavor Elementary to the position of principal at Cocoa High School.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Blackburn, thank you for the opportunity to be the next head Tiger. I appreciate it. Dr. Sullivan, thank you for your mentorship, your friendship, and I'm looking forward to working for you again. To my Panther family, I have to brag a little bit about my Panther family that you inherited, Hyla. They sent me off today like no other. It was great. It was awesome. You are inheriting a fabulous staff. Take care of my folks now. Take good care of my folks. To my Cocoa family, I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm ready to hit the ground running. I'm looking forward to the partnership, the teamwork that's going to take. Somebody told me last night that I had some big shoes to fill. And I told that person, I'm not trying to fill nobody's shoes. I'm just going to try to be the best me that I can be. Thank you. And one last thing, before I get killed, my family. My family. Thank you so much for your support. I love you. My wife, my mother, my two daughters, my sister-in-law, my sister's mother, my friends, everybody. I want to make sure I don't forget nobody. I don't want to be on the couch tonight. Thank you, sir. All right.
Mr. Wilson, I can help you with a lot of things, but I wouldn't have been able to help you with that particular problem. So. Also, we welcome Hyla Mercer as she begins her new role as principal of Endeavor Elementary.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. I don't think I have ever met a better listener. So thank you for that. I want to thank Ms. Klein. She has been an incredible support, and she listened even though she has heard everything many times before. So thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Wilson for the excellent model that he has provided at Endeavor. Talk about big shoes to fill. And I love to stand next to him because it's quite a sight. But I'm going to do the very best I can, and I've made some promises that I will keep. I want to thank all the Endeavor staff. I have a t-shirt, I have flowers, I have a lanyard from my former assistant principal at Cambridge. I have my calendar all set up just right. and Dr. Smith back there. I want to thank my husband. I would not be standing here if he had not given me 100% support. And it was a hard decision, and I really appreciate his support. I had a friend text me that I failed retirement. I will own that. But what I want to say is I really missed Team Cocoa. I missed being a part of a community that thinks about forward progress every day. Every day. Pastor Corky Calhoun is here. They have been so, Georgiana United Methodist Church has been so involved in the life of Cambridge while I was there and now with Dr. Smith. I want to tell you, when that group says they will raise you up, you better be ready to fly. I feel like I've come home, and I thank you for that.
Congratulations to Janice Rutherford on her reclassification and transfer from the role of assistant principal at Meadow Lane Primary to the position of principal at Saturn Elementary.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Thank you, board members. Thank you for your belief in me. Thank you, Mrs. Klein, for your confidence in me as a leader. Wow, all I can say is just to be included tonight with some of the great leaders that I'm here with tonight is just an amazing experience for me. I am so thankful and so grateful and humbled by this whole experience. I do intend to rise to the next level. I thank all of my family that is here tonight. My mom, who has been my rock my entire life, my brother Brian, who is a superstar in his own realm at Northrop Grumman, my sister-in-law Amanda, who is a wonderful teacher at Brevard Public Schools at Gemini Elementary, my children, both Indialantic Elementary students, my nieces, students at Gemini and West Shore Elementary, my wonderful mother-in-law and my grandmother that is here tonight to support me, my husband Ryan, that I would not be here without to do this. I would not have the initiative to be able to do this without you, so thank you. And to my Meadow Lane family, I will miss you tremendously. As I told our teachers at Meadow Lane, it was all because of them. They formed me into the leader that I will become and have become here at Meadow Lane and now going to Saturn. So, Mrs. Schroeder, thank you for everything you have done to lead me to this point. I'm exactly where I need to be, and I thank you for everything you have taught me as a leader at our school. To my teacher leaders that are here tonight, I will miss you desperately, but I know that you are well prepared and in good hands, and I full confidence that you will take Meadow Lane to the next level. To Ms. Lyle, our Employee of the Year that is here to celebrate, thank you. Thank you for praying for me every day. Please keep praying. I need them more than ever now. And I will remember you always and carry the essence of Meadow Lane with me no matter where I go to every school and every capacity that I serve within this district. Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Thank you, all of you, for your confidence in me as a leader for Saturn Elementary. Thank you.
Now we recognize Andrea McDonald on her reclassification and transfer from the position of Title I Coordinator at Croton Elementary to the position of Assistant Principal at Sherwood Elementary. Did I say your last name right?
It's Adria McDonough.
Like
That's
I said,
okay.
Adria McDonough.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Thank you, board, for this recommendation. I also want to thank Dr. Karen Ivory for giving me this opportunity and believing in me that I can do it. And I appreciate her daughter, beautiful daughter, coming also tonight. I thank Dr. Roseanne Bennett as well. I've been with her for 14 years at Anderson and at Croton. So I appreciate all of the mentorship she's given me, and it's hard to say goodbye. I'll always be a Cardinal, but I'm looking forward to my time at Sherwood. And I also so I'm not in the doghouse. My husband, Paul, thank you for everything that you do. and his support. And thank you to my in-laws right here, my son Luke, and my mother. I wish my dad could be here tonight. He just passed, so thank you so much.
Congratulations are also in order to Dr. Stephanie Sullivan on her transfer and reclassification from the position of principal at Cocoa High to the position of assistant superintendent of secondary leading and learning.
Thank you all very much. Thank you to our incredible school board, and thank you, Dr. Blackburn, for this leap of faith in supporting what I hope to be a really exciting times for secondary schools in Brevard County. I have an incredible group that is surrounding me here tonight that is representative of the support that I've had in my entire career. Started 22 years ago at the Great Southwest and worked as a teacher and assistant principal there with some of the best principals and leaders that you could possibly imagine for one school site. And then 10 years ago, I got a call that changed my life forever. I was given the gift of serving in the most remarkable school in this district with a team of educators that had a relentless passion for supporting kids. Really, there's no other way to describe it more eloquently. And some of those are here with me tonight, including some of the students from the best school in the county. I'm so appreciative of particularly administrators, Ms. McCormick, and the folks that listen to me every day, walk in the office and say, I have a vision. And they cringe at first, and then they help execute that vision. And so we live in the land of visions at Cocoa High School, and I look forward to taking that same passion to the district and see what we can do in our secondary schools. My husband, Michael, is here with me tonight. He's a teacher at Mel High. You may have seen him recently in the paper for his 500 wins as basketball. And some extra love for my daughter, Abigail. She was born into administration. I was an assistant principal when I had her and has spent her entire life giving of time and effort in our household to other kids. And that's not an easy position to be in, so I thank you, dear. And thank you all very much, and I'm looking forward to our next steps, and thank you guys especially.
Mrs. Belford, members of the board, and the audience, before we move on, I'm being told that the Journalism Tigers of Cocoa High School would like to share a video that they have made as a surprise farewell to Dr. Sullivan.
Yeah, not here, right? No, they're not working. Oh, they're not working.
Yeah, we got legs. Yeah, let's go.
Can we get it on that screen as well? I want to introduce, I'm Vanessa Skipper. I teach English and journalism at Cocoa High. It's a new class this year that I've been begging Dr. Sullivan to have. And these are three of my talented artists, Jordan Rocco, Gabe Laracas, and Courtney Coleman. And Gabe spent many evenings putting this together, and I had them sneaking around the campus doing this. So the real superstars are here, and we just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. I'm gonna miss you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for your leadership and guidance, and we wish you the very best.
I just want to thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for being a great mentor, principal to the school, and dedicating not only your personal but professional life to the success of these students.
You know I love you because I am on the camera one more time. But thank you so much for giving me a chance here. I love it, and you are going to. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. We love you. Love. You're the best leader, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you for leading our boys to state. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. You were the first person who gave me a job, and it's I'm going to make it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Being very fourth quarter. High five. Roar. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for all the stuff that you have put into the whole house.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. You made Civil High a great place to learn.
Here's our special look at the new vendor.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for giving me the chance to be a tiger.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. We love you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. We'll miss you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for everything you've done for me. Good luck, and we'll miss you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for always setting our productions and for all your love and support. Our dear family, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for all your love and support throughout all the years. And we want to say,
We love you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for all that you do for the school. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Best luck in Grayson and maybe on Mosley. I know I'll be on the file for being myself. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for all of your support over the years. I've enjoyed working with you. Hi, Dr. Sullivan. I just want to say I'm going to miss you a lot. Thank you very much for hiring me and you last me. You were one of the most effective principals I've ever worked under. So I really believe you did a really great and so thank you, everything you taught me, and good luck after your office.
Hello. I know I'm going to have a wonderful time because I'm talking about a wonderful principal. Dr. Sullivan, it's been a pleasure knowing you. You've done a great job here at Cocoa High. I'm sorry that you're leaving, but good luck. And I have to go because I've got to go to a meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan, I want to thank you for always challenging me to be the best educator that I can be, and for always accommodating my crazy requests and fulfilling them. For example, by bringing journalism and news production back to Cocoa High. Good luck. We love you, Tiger High.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. It's been truly an honor to work for you over these last 8 years. I appreciate all your hard work and dedication to the ROTC program that's made the program what it is today. You've been an inspiring leader, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, and congratulations. You're doing great. You're going and we're so happy for you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. We just, on behalf of the staff, we say thank you for everything that for Cocoa High. Good luck in your new job, and we will be around and
Thank you for paying my birth certificate. And thank you for supporting me in my track meets. And
Doc, thanks for giving me the opportunity to work at Cocoa. Best principal I've ever worked with, and good luck in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan! Thank you, Dr. Sullivan!
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. For many years, just good times.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. I'm sure I'm going to miss you. It's going to be a Tiger Pride, and it's definitely going to be just for you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for this wonderful opportunity, for affording me this wonderful opportunity to be a new head Tiger in your absence. You're moving to the district. We're going to miss you. We love you. And again, thank you.
Dr. Blackburn, please tell us about the recognition items on this evening's agenda.
I was about to say thank you, Dr. Sullivan. This item is to recognize school board member Mr. Andy Ziegler. Mr. Ziegler was nominated and named a finalist for the Consortium of Florida Education Foundation's Star School Board Member Statewide Award for his support of Brevard Schools Foundation. Brevard Schools Foundation President Janice Kershaw will present Mr. Ziegler with a certificate recognizing his contributions.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn, and happy birthday.
Thank
Saw
you.
that on Facebook today. Okay. Since his election in 2008, Andy Ziegler has played a starring role in Brevard Schools Foundation. As a board member, Mr. Ziegler is seen everywhere in the community and never misses an opportunity to help build bridges between Brevard Schools Foundation and businesses. Perhaps the most successful example of his leadership was helping facilitate an affinity program between Andretti Thrill Park and Brevard Schools Foundation. The ensuing partnership has brought in over $78,000 to Brevard Schools Foundation. Mr. Ziegler is someone the foundation can always count on to say yes, whether it's attending our back-to-school backpack giveaway at the Supply Zone, coming to a donor event, golfing to raise money for our Take Stock in Children program, serving as an auctioneer at our fundraisers, delivering award checks to teachers who are receiving one of our Bright Ideas classroom grants, throwing out the first pitch at a baseball game, or even reading mean tweets about himself at last year's ABC Awards. Mr. Ziegler stands out as an exceptional school board member advocating for Brevard Schools Foundation. It's his tireless commitment to increasing business and community investment and involvement in our schools that led to his nomination for the statewide award as a champion of Brevard Schools Foundation. I'm pleased to present the certificate recognizing him as a finalist for the Consortium of Florida Education Foundation's Star School Board Member Award. Would you come down and take a picture with me, Mr. Ziegler? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kershaw. We are now ready for the resolutions and proclamations. Dr. Blackburn.
Mrs. Belford, there are three proclamations on tonight's agenda. Ms. Foley will read each of them for us. First is item C8, which is a proclamation designated February 1st through February 28th as Career and Technical Education Month in Brevard Public Schools.
Proclamation, Career and Technical Education Month, February 1st through 28th, 2017. Whereas February 1st through 28th, 2017 has been designated Career and Technical Education Month by the Association for Career and Technical Education. And whereas profound economic and technological changes in our society are rapidly reflected in the structure and nature of work, thereby placing new and additional responsibilities on our educational system. And whereas the efforts of career and technical educators, business and industry stimulate the growth and vitality of our local economy and of the entire nation by preparing graduates for careers that are forecast to experience the largest and fastest growth in the next decade. And whereas career and technical education serves as the backbone of a strong, well-educated workforce and contributes to Florida's mission to become the global destination for jobs and America's leadership in the international marketplace. And whereas the workers of tomorrow are in our classrooms today, and career and technical education provides Brevard students with a school-to-careers connection, helping them experience practical and meaningful applications of any number of skills. And whereas career and technical education is a tried and true solution to ensure that competitive skilled workers are ready, willing, and capable of holding jobs in high-wage, high-skill, high-demand career fields such as STEM disciplines, nursing, allied health, construction, information technology, energy sustainability, and many other areas that are vital in keeping our nation competitive in the global economy. Therefore, be it resolved that Brevard Public Schools join with the Association for Career and Technical Education and schools, districts, and communities around the nation to proclaim February 1st through 28th, 2017 as Career and Technical Education Month, and recognize the importance of career and technical education in preparing a well-educated and skilled workforce in America, and encourage citizens, educators, counselors, and administrators to promote career and technical education as a valuable option to students.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion?
Just one comment. Thank you, Ms. Foley. I know that you guys are tight on staffing, but providing what you actually are doing for it is awesome. Thank you for continuing to do that with each of these proclamations. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We are the communicators.
And the proclamation passes 5-0.
We will proceed to item C9, which is a proclamation designating February as Black History Month in Brevard Public Schools.
Resolution. Whereas the month of February is recognized nationwide as Black History Month, and whereas it is important to understand the different origins, culture, and heritage of all Americans, and whereas much recognition is due to the many outstanding African Americans who overcame many obstacles to excel in such fields as education, medicine, the arts, sports, and business, and whereas learning from the struggles and accomplishments of others helps strengthen our bond as a national family, and whereas it is appropriate for schools to plan lessons and special activities to recognize the important role African Americans have played in the growth and prosperity of our nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the School Board of Brevard County wishes to call attention to the important historical contributions of African Americans to endorse the observance of Black History Month in Brevard County Public Schools.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by, we'll give it to Ms. Deskovich. Any discussion? Please vote. And the proclamation carries 5-0.
Last, we have item C10, which is a proclamation designating February 6th through the 10th as Student Services Week in Brevard County.
Resolution. Whereas the Student Services Program in Florida's public schools includes guidance and counseling services, visiting teacher services, school social work services, occupational and placement services, school health services, and psychological services. And whereas Student Services Week helps to focus citizen attention on the Student Services Program as an integral part of the total public education program. And whereas a specifically designated week provides the opportunity for student services personnel to fully define and present their services to students, faculty, parents, and communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the School Board of Brevard County, Florida hereby designates February 6th through 10th, 2017 as Student Services Week and encourages all citizens to become more fully acquainted with the support this program provides to students in Florida's public schools.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Any discussion? I do have one discussion point not directly related to this item on the agenda, but since Ms. Foley is up here, I think that this is the appropriate time for us to do so. She has been working tirelessly since Michelle left us to go to a private firm, and she has been filling both her role and Michelle's role in some trying times when it comes to communication. So I think we just need to give our thanks to her for all that she has done. And although Abby is not here with you, I would also like to publicly say, Abby, thank you for all that you have done over these past couple of weeks. I know it certainly has not been easy, but we are very appreciative of the work that you all have done to carry us through until Mr. Reed can join the team and give you some support. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Now please vote. All right, Dr. Blackburn. Oh, I didn't give the vote. It passed 5-0, Pam. Dr. Blackburn, let's proceed with our presentations.
Mrs. Belford and members of the board, BFT President Dan Bennett and BFT Vice President Anthony Colucci will be presenting results from the BFT Time Survey. I was trying to drag that out because I saw Mr. Bennett kind of moseying up here.
I think they're too far away.
Happy birthday, sir.
Thank you.
And good evening, members of the board. We have a presentation loaded into this machine somewhere. Here we go. And I have a copy of the presentation for you. Let's see if that works. Is that showing up? Here we go. I'll keep a copy. No cheating and following ahead, or jumping ahead. 4, 5. I have an extra.
Pass them down.
Math background, Mr. Bennett.
Well, good evening, everyone. We set out about a year ago, and we spoke to Mr. Ziegler when he was chair, and I think through negotiations also, the idea that we wanted to do some presentations for you, and this is the first of them, addressing the question of how do teachers use their time. Specifically, there's a line in our contract, which is the 40-hour work week. It says in our contract somewhere, teachers shall have a 40-hour work week. And there's no dispute that it's ever less than 40 hours. But anecdotally, we know that the teacher work week drags far more than 40 hours. And it's something I say anecdotally because we've all heard the stories. We're all teachers. We know that it's not an 8-hour day job. You all hear from teachers that are working into the evenings, that are working into the weekends, that are preparing over holidays, and you know that. So I'd say this question of how long is the teacher work week really, it comes up about 2 times. It comes up, well, during contract negotiations when y'all are offering money and we're going, oh man, don't they know how hard we work? It's not a 40-hour week job. It's one time it comes up. Another time it comes up is when you're dropping more stuff on us. When a principal comes back to the school from an in-service, or when teachers come back from an in-service and it finds, hey, here's another thing. Here's another great thing. It's good for kids, and do this too. And then teachers have this collective desire to tell you, don't you know how much we're already doing? Well, we also know not only do you have this need to know this, but you also have a desire to see it in data. So we set out to do that with a survey we put out in the fall, or excuse me, in the spring. That's right, April would be spring into summer. For a couple months we left this open and we had over 1,000 responses. And we were trying to find out where the time went. and see if we could actually quantify just how long this is. Now, again, you're going to see some numbers here that are, I mean, every number you're going to see is an average, right, with over 1,000 things. And a lot of this we have spliced out between elementary, middle, and high. We did have a category for junior, senior highs, and we just kind of rolled that into, well, junior or senior high. Well, I guess we'll get to it because we have some interesting information to share. Every slide isn't this small. Oh boy, that's tiny. Every slide isn't this small, I promise. But for those looking, and you have it up close, what this is, it shows everything that we asked teachers to give us. In some cases, we said how much you spend in an average day. In some cases, we said how much you spend in an average week. In some cases, it might have been monthly, and then we try to turn it into a week. I'm just going to very quickly call out the categories just so everyone knows what we asked. I'm not going to try to get into the time and all that. We'll do the summary at the end. But we asked teachers how much instructional time they have in a week, how much planning time they have, how long do they really get for duty-free lunch, their before-school duty, their after-school duty, escorting students around campus, parent phone calls, parent emails, administration emails, colleague emails, parent conferences, collaborative meetings like the PLCs and the CMA, faculty meetings, independent time to write their lesson planning, grading papers, analyzing student data, behavior data, entering all that stuff, working on IEPs, school-based committees, conferences with administration, and finally setting up the room, which includes photocopies, your bulletin boards, things like that. And boy, we had over 1,000 people take the time to kind of calculate this and put all this together. And each question we had to do some individual work on, and we're not going to go through each question, but just for an example, we asked teachers how long the average faculty meeting is. And then we said, and how often do you have them? So like, let's say a teacher said, well, the faculty meeting is an hour, typically an hour, and we have them once a month. Then we did some math there and said, okay, so we're going to average it out to 15 minutes per week, get it, sort of thing. If every week, half an hour, then we put in 30 minutes. So we had to do a little bit of calculating here, played with some spreadsheets and things. And we came up, there's actually a typo. I want to just, we're off by 4 minutes. But if you were to add all that up, and I promise people watching the other slides, it's bigger print. That was the only one that had to be small. But for bigger print, it's the total minutes in a week is 3,026 minutes. And then we felt we had to subtract out planning time because that would have been double counting something. We can't say we have this much time for planning and then add in grading papers because some of this stuff gets done during planning. So a true average of these 1,000 people that took the time to do the survey was 2,791 minutes. And it's off from 4 minutes from the presentation you're looking at, just re-added. Okay, what is that? Oh, I'm sorry, before we get to the summaries of that, the grand conclusion, 2 big things we did not ask about. And we just didn't know how to. Remember I said for faculty meetings we had to do some calculating and sort of thing. We didn't ask about the time you need to do report cards because that's kind of seasonal, and it used to be 4 times a year, now it's 8 times a year because you have interim reports. But then that week is very labor intensive that week, getting in there. Some teachers are putting in comments, some teachers are doing summaries, and then when you have it all set in Edline, you have to run another report, and then the computers crash, you got to go home and do it over the weekend, and all kinds of troubles with that. And then Enrich goes down, and then you have to, you type it all in, it doesn't save, you got to do it all again. Or there's a new program we might use from the state. So that's a labor-intensive task we could not capture in this. And the other thing we didn't capture is time to do the evaluation system. And again, that's seasonal. My time that I write that PGP, my time that I go and conference with other teachers, observe other teachers, and give them the feedback, and all that stuff that go, uploading artifacts, photocopying and scanning and PDFing, and then go meet with the principal you might meet with the principal an hour in a week and then go several more weeks without meeting again. So that is time we didn't capture. But to get to the grand conclusion, it averaged out to 46.5 hours per week. And I'm pausing there because when I saw it, I paused. And at first I thought, wow, I would have thought that would have been more. But remember, I didn't capture a lot. We didn't capture a lot of stuff. And none of that captures just the niceties, the social interactions. You talk to someone, you meet with someone. During the day, you have other conversations that aren't just work. We're not just machines that work solid straight on through, 9.5 hours a day. But it works out to about 15% above our day. 46 hours would be 15% above what you're allegedly paying us for in the contract. And there's different ways of looking into that. We hear all the time from elementary school teachers that say, we're there till at least 5 o'clock every day. Well, that makes sense because it's like an extra hour and 15 minutes every day. And if you're supposed to go home at 3:30 and it's an hour 15, later, then yeah, you're packing up, you're leaving not before 5. And some teachers have to get out every day, but then they're bringing home those over 6.5 hours. Remember, some weeks are much more intensive, because of some of those other tasks. It's almost like, another way of looking at it, it's almost like work until June 30th for free. If we really did have a 40-hour work week and we really did get out every day at 8 hours, well, okay, how about you work through June for free? That's what it's like, adding 15% to your week. So we wanted to go a little further and drill down a little deeper, and this is what you have in some other slides coming up, and I'm not going to do this whole thing. We're going to let Vanessa's going to come up here soon, and then Anthony's going to talk about the guide. I promised people I wouldn't say it. There's the first word I said. He's going to talk about the counselors coming up in a little bit. They're trying to get away from the phrase guidance. They are professional school counselors providing professional counseling services to our students. We looked at them separately in a separate survey, and Anthony's going to get to that. But we looked at, the next question after we get an average, are there any practices within our current, employment where we could actually capture some savings right now in what's going on? Anthony and I know anecdotally going into schools, and Vanessa knows from talking to building reps at different schools, that some of the culture of different schools for respecting teachers' time is different. It varies from school. Some schools we'll go to, and we'll just hear a whole bunch of teachers just start telling us about all the stuff that they're required to do. And other teachers, the principal will greet us and talk about how much they respect teacher time at that school. And of course, we have to go further than just the principal to find out. Some principals talk about how much they respect teacher time. We talk to the teachers, we find out, well, they speak a good line about that. But then some schools, they really do, get them out of meetings and streamline some things and streamline some processes. So this is what some of these slides are going to be dedicated to, looking at differences here. Okay, lesson planning. We have to sit down, write in our plan book. This is not the part where I'm in a collaborative meeting where I'm doing team planning. This is the part I'm sitting with my plan book and I have to get all this either typed in or filled in or written in or something. The average for elementary school, well, that's about 2.5 hours a week. It's about half an hour a day. Okay, maybe we figure that's right. And yet, over a third of teachers say they're spending 3 or more hours per week on that. Okay, so that's another half hour to the average. But does it have to be that way? Well, almost 30% of teachers, almost 3 out of 10 are saying they can get away with an hour or less every week. And we know this anecdotally. We go into schools, and I'll sit in the evaluation meetings, and I'll have teachers will open up their plan books, and they got these big fat binders with tiny, 8-point font with little boxes filled in. They've got every single little detail of every little thing that they do, and the principal's still saying, I need to capture every single minute of what's going on. And I need to see I need to see examples of higher order questions and every standard. And I need to see all this stuff. Teachers will bring these binders that they spend hours and hours and hours on, and principals say, well, it's still not enough. And then I'll talk to other teachers at other schools and say, well, we have basically the contractual things. We have the standard, we have, what we're going to do for assessment, and they plan much less. And the question we ask is that all that extra stuff that goes into those plan books that are required at certain schools, does it really improve the student scores? Or is it, and I love it when principals will tell a teacher, they'll say, well, we need all that, what if there's a sub? If there's a sub, the sub is not reading the 8-point font to figure out what's going on pages and pages. The sub wants to see bam, 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 what are we doing? And we hope that's what principals will require in their plan books too. Now, this is not meant to be a contest, but the next question, or excuse me, the next group, we splice this out by elementary, middle, and high school. The high school the middle school had a slightly higher average than that. Remember, the elementary school teachers reported on average 156 minutes per week. Middle school ended up with 202 minutes per week. And you've got your secondary teachers out there starting to beat the drum about the 6 to 7 is really getting to be a problem. I mean, they've been beating that for a long time. Now we have a lot of teachers picked up that extra class. For a lot of them, it's an extra preparation. And so for a lot of them, it reports more time. And yet, look at when we splice this out some, 41% of them are saying 3 hours or more. Remember, 3 hours is contained within that 202 minutes, right? 180 minutes would be 3 hours. And yet we still have 20% of teachers can get away with an hour or less. Now, I'm not reporting to you that 20% of teachers are slouching on their plans. I'm reporting you 20% of teachers, their plans are just fine. The evaluation shows the planning is just fine. And yet the requirements at some places is where we could capture some time savings. High school, similar, just about 3 hours on the dot, for planning per week, and yet a fourth of high school teachers say it takes them an hour or less to plan every week. So what is it that makes some schools and some administrators and some evaluators say you don't have to plan those or produce those huge those huge binders. All right, I want to invite Vanessa up here. She's going to talk about, or she's going to pick up talking about some of those collaborative meetings, some of those new things that say within the last decade have come into our school district.
So when we were looking at the data from teachers who talked about the meetings, whether it's PLC, CMAs, team meetings, if you look at the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school data, it seems to almost correspond to the 80-20 rule. So, you know, a lot of them are reporting that they're spending an hour or less on. So a lot of them are reporting that they're spending an hour or less, but then there's the section of schools that are reporting they're spending 2 hours or more. So I think the question that we need to ask here, why are those schools spending extra meetings? Are these meetings being scheduled and they're quote unquote not mandatory meetings, but they have a sign-in sheet so the teacher feels like they have to attend? What is being done during those meetings? Is it thoughtful collaboration? Is it data for the sake of data to make a colorful chart? Or is it data collection and discussion that the teacher is actually going to go directly back into his or her classroom and be able to influence learning with the students in the desk in front of him or her? And so I would actually be interested to know, you know, which the schools these are, because I bet you if we were able to break that down even further, we would see that the teachers in the categories that are reporting 2 hours or more, the 80-20 rule, are at specific schools. And I think conversations between principals, which I know are already happening, you know, what are you doing at your schools as far as scheduling, as far as thoughtful meetings, as far as spending teachers' time appropriately. Going on to, in an average week, how many minutes will you spend grading papers? So I guess I should click this. That's just showing the different data for middle and high. And of course, this is always a fun argument to get into with secondary and elementary. I always have to call teachers off about, you know, how much teachers in elementary schools spend grading papers versus how many minutes teachers in high school, or even vice versa between a math teacher and an English teacher. You know, when all my classes turn in essays, that's a weekend of grading for me. So we talk about those differences. Also, we need to look at, you know, as far as grading papers and the time spent in these different categories, like the time spending gathering data, the time spent lesson planning, the time spent grading papers. We need to be able to have conversations with our teachers that ask, all right, what do you think is the most appropriate use of your time? Because if I looked at all of these things, of course, lesson planning is very important. You have to look at your standards, you have to know why you're teaching something, you have to know what your end goal is. But ultimately, you have to be thinking about the feedback you're able to give to students. And of course, that comes into the grading papers. This, you know, the sooner you get a paper back into a student hand, there's that immediate feedback so that we can correct and move on and adjust. So I think as far as lesson planning, when we go back to that amount of time, lesson planning should be fluid. All right, so lesson planning should not be something that's set in stone, that's in this, I say this, I keep huge binders, but it's not just lesson plans. It shouldn't be something that, you know, the administrator holds that teacher to immediately, because a good teacher reflects on their practice and their teaching constantly. So I think that we really need to look at, when we're adjusting minutes, what is the most important use of teachers' time in the classroom. This next one is a lot of fun for an English teacher to go through, since they put fancy words on there like standard deviation. But when I look at this, all right, how much time does a teacher spend analyzing data, all right, and clicking through all the programs that honestly sometimes don't always work because of internet issues or bandwidth issues or issues like that? How many of these minutes correlate with meetings that the teachers are in with other teachers, pulling data that doesn't even relate to students in their class? And I think, again, these are conversations that need to be had at school sites. school by school, administrator by administrator, what is the story behind the data? All right, so is it data for the sake of data? Is it data for a chart that's meeting a line item on the evaluation rubric so, somebody can be evaluated distinguished? Is it student data that the teacher is pulling because they just gave an assessment in the classroom and they're going to go put that data in front of the student and say, hey, you got this question and this question wrong. Let's talk about why you got those wrong. What were your answer choices? That's valid data. So we have to look at the story behind the data. What are they pulling? Is it valid or not? And we need to make sure teachers are analyzing data that means something to them and their classrooms. And I think that brings it to Anthony's portion.
Short guy problems. So Mr. Ziegler always needs to be difficult, we know that. He specifically asked that we put a question in there, if the board could do one thing to improve your work environment, what would it be? So we had over 1,000 responses to his question, so we had to find a way to get you guys the information. So this right here is a word cloud. It's a graphical representation of word frequency. So these are the most common 8 words found in the answers to Mr. Ziegler's question. And the more times the word appeared, the bigger it appears. So you could see by far planning was the most used word in that response, and then followed by paperwork and pay. And then we have behavior, discipline, evaluation, PGP, and testing. When we get to our recommendations, I want you to look back at that when you ask, well, where'd you get these recommendations from? It came from these responses. No, wrong way. So at the time that we were beginning this time study, we were approached by another association, the Brevard School Counselors, and they started expressing some concerns to us about how their time was being used. So we felt it was appropriate to do a separate survey for them. We had 83 responses from the professional school counselors, which Dan alluded is what they want to be referred to in the 21st century. They feel it's more reflective of what they do rather than guidance counselors. But I probably will slip out the phrase guidance counselors at some point. Want to point out that 2 of 5 of the focuses of our school district are social emotional learning and college and career readiness. And those are 2 pieces that you would think our professional school counselors would have a hand in. Just to jump ahead a little bit, theoretically, we could have our counselors spending 10 hours a week on cafeteria duty, 10 hours on hall, and 5 hours covering for administration based on the results of their survey. So that would leave them 15 hours a week to do everything else. You have all the questions and all the responses for this. I'm just gonna point out a couple of them. So if you look at the bottom left box, approximately how many hours per week do you spend on individual or group counseling? 80% are spending an hour or less per day on that. So that's kind of telling. And on the bottom right, approximately how many hours per week do you spend on career and education counseling? We have about 80% again spending an hour or less per day. Next slide, top left. Approximately how many hours a week do you spend on crisis intervention and preventative counseling? As Dan pointed out to me, it's probably good that they're not spending a lot of time on crisis counseling, but we're more concerned about the preventative counseling, identifying at-risk students and beginning the process to work with them. And we see that, 50% are spending about an hour a day on that, and 20% are spending no time each week. If you look at the bottom right, follow-up counseling service, nearly 90% are spending an hour or less a day. So when they are providing counseling service, it's a one-time event. And we know how important follow-up is to that. Next page or slide, we started thinking about, okay, what is it that counselors do? And a lot of our assumptions were confirmed, that they are spending a lot of time doing things that you wouldn't think a professional school counselor is doing. You see we have 13% spending up to 10 hours a week on hall duty. And on the next slide, we see that cafeteria duty, nearly 15% are spending up to 10 hours a week. And also I want to point out on that last one, approximately how many hours they spend on conflict resolution, over 45% or don't spend any time doing that per week. So we have these district goals of social emotional learning and college and career readiness, and we expect our counselors to be heavily involved in that, and it seems like they're being pulled in a million different directions. So we just have some recommendations with that you work with administrators and counselors to determine how much or how to match district priorities with the schedules of our professional school counselors. Some conclusions to our time study is that teachers' responses vary greatly. That was a major focus of what we found, and an opportunity lies in determining why. And lastly, we have some recommendations. As I pointed out, a lot of these came from examining the answers to that word cloud. Alter secondary schedules to increase planning. Provide all early release days to be used at teachers' discrimination. Eliminate PGP. Did I say discrimination? Discretion, thank you. Streamline the evaluation system. If we can't do this within the 40-hour work week, we may need to consider that teachers need to be compensated for doing these duties outside the 40-hour work week. It does happen in other districts. And also to survey the principals, to gather feedback about areas with large variance and promote the best practices. And that's what we have, and if you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Board members, any questions? Mr. Susan?
When I'm looking at these numbers, I remember when I was teaching, and they're not even close to what it was when I was in there. If you told any secondary teacher that they only spend 2 hours planning for the whole week, they would tell you that's crazy, right? So I know you guys went way conservative on these numbers. One of the other areas that's not mentioned here today is multiple preps. A lot of times when you're seeing these variances, part of that will be you might have a teacher that gets dumped 2-3 preps. Now, by contract, they're only supposed to have 2 classes. But I'll tell you right now, I've taught 4. And when you're trying to prep for 4 classes, that's 4 boards, that's 4 lectures, that's 4 sets of emails, and that's not even the same class. It's not like Honors 1 and Honors, and regular. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that you might have sometimes your papers and your grades and all that other stuff are 10 times harder in one of the regular classes that you may be dealing with 504s and IEPs and everything else, whereas some of the other guys get the high level as far as the honors and they're just teaching through. So there's a lot of that needs to look at. What I mean when I say that one of the recommendations that should be there, it was always a pet peeve of mine, is multiple preps. We should get to a point. I've been in high schools where they had less programs, but you didn't know what you were going to teach until 2 weeks prior to the school year starting. And I've been at other places that had more programs, so it wasn't difficult to do the schedule. We knew prior to us leaving that it was there. That's a huge thing, because then knowing that they're not at the last minute trying to put it together, multiple preps ends up happening in those situations, plus it helps. So I just kind of wanted to add that to you. And how much time did you guys say that the people who use on the PGP? Would you give them a rough estimate if you had to say how much time spent by an individual over the year? What would you say?
Let me, we didn't ask that specific question on this survey, but we did a couple of years ago on the PGP, and we gave them, on that one we gave a range. We didn't say fill in a number. We said 0 to 5, 5 to 10, things like that. And the most common answer was over 20 hours. That was before we had option B, but teachers were taking that like a research paper on that. So yeah, that's easily, the teacher's still doing option A. That's a 10 to 20 hour at least activity. Mm-hmm. And then when you consider all the implementation, I have to go observe someone for
that's what I was
3 class
mostly
periods. and then I have to do a write-up, have to do a follow-up meeting. Then I go sit with the principal for half an hour to an hour for those meetings, the follow-up stuff. That you're getting a lot of hours right there.
That was the piece that I was looking at, is the fact that it's not so much writing the PGP. Yes, that's going to take 10 to 20 hours, and some people are crazy. They get so involved into it, and some people aren't. But it's the actual implementation of monitoring and doing all the other things that we lose a lot of the plannings. I think there's an angle that we can go after.
And I think the other thing that we need to look at too, and it goes back to the 80-20 rule, is there are schools that are doing this with a common sense approach.
Yeah.
And then there are schools that are micromanaging every single word on the rubric. And that's when teachers pull out their hair and spend 10 to 15 hours a day. So
Yep.
Places that are going at it with a common sense approach are not spending near that amount of time.
And Matt, I just want to say, I think you're right on with the planning time. We didn't have anyone, or we didn't have an average that was down to 2 hours. The elementary had the lowest for individual planning time, which was at 2.5 hours, but then their collaborative meetings was the highest.
Yeah.
So maybe they're getting some planning done, working in groups. They had over an hour, like an hour and a half a week of those collaborative meetings. The secondaries, where it really showed up, having that extra prep, multiple preps, that's where they were getting over to 3.5 hours per week for the planning. So right, what we can do to reduce the plannings is going to help a lot. And then I would say just the requirements of what has to go into the plan book as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Craig.
Thank you for the time and putting that in there. And mostly, thank you for putting solutions or recommendations in the back. I do have a question, though, and Anthony, I'd love that you give a picture, because you know me, I like pictures. So you center planning as the picture, yet your recommendations would only really do anything for planning at the secondary level. All the other things would affect everyone. Yet your middle school times were vastly higher than the secondary school times. So I'm a little at a loss, as you know, that there are a couple of those things on that list are already well down the path of being corrected or being altered. So that's a good thing, and I think we're all on the same page there. But I don't see any recommendation. You've laid out a great case, but just for the wrong people, it looks like. So what about the middle school people?
Well, your middle school is part of secondary. At least we considered that when we were putting everything together. So middle and high school all counts as secondary. So if we could get relief there, that would help. For elementary school, the challenge there is to look at all the meetings and look at all the requirements that are dropped on that. And of course, if we can find more time in the day, if either the activity could be lengthened or before or after school, but that's where the time seems to be taken from. The before school duty, the after school duty, the required meetings during the week. Even though we have it contractually down to 2 meetings per week, somehow principals end up so-called optional meetings, or you're voluntold that you'll be somewhere, and that's where they end up losing some time. If we could get more respect for that planning time that's already there, meaning fewer things dropped on their plates during their planning time, then we can, get them some more relief as well.
Okay, fair enough. One other question is, so, we go through the same thing up here. Stuff doesn't work, right? We try and log in, we try and take a vote. I mean, it happens. That's just, so what is your acceptable, and this is really just a kind of pie in the sky answer, but there has to be an acceptable level of inefficiency, right? So any business would have that. What would you consider an acceptable level of inefficiency? Is it 5% of the day? Is it 2% of the day? You're never going to have a perfect day, right? So, and everything's never going to work 100%. So what is acceptable?
Yeah, I'll let them do the percent. I wanted to speak to, although I can say, if I have a 46-minute planning and Ed Line is circling for 10 to 12 minutes of it, and my tech doesn't want me to shove my computer off my desk because I'm frustrated, and I end up obviously doing other things and then putting grades in at home, I'm not sure what I would equate to a percentage, but I can say the biggest thing that gets on my nerves as a professional is having my time wasted. So, I know there has to be an acceptable level somewhere, but for me, it would probably be less than 5%.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just interested.
But I wanted to speak to, secondary and elementary, and yes, we've got to find some more time for elementary school teachers. But on page 10, I think some of that assigned here, 80% of high school report spending an hour less. on team meetings and CMA and stuff like that. So I think it'd be interesting to see which high schools have common planning. I can say that's one thing we've had for 2 years at Cocoa High School, where we have common planning by grade, by subject. And we're not forced to plan together. It happens organically, which is the best way for it to happen. But I'm imagining, because of all the different preps, like Mr. Susan said, that a lot of time there's not time during the school day afforded to high school teachers to collaborate because of the multiple preps, because of not common planning between teams or subject level.
Cool. Thank you, Vanessa.
I'll take a shot at answering that.
Okay.
Some questions, and you've asked a question in a way, it seems the answer lends itself to a data point. You know, what's a percent that's acceptable? But I kind of have to more do it anecdotally, because I'm not really a computer guy knowing
No, that's fine.
networks and things. It seems, just anecdotally, in my years of doing this, that the network is getting stronger, and that more reliable, and that we used to hear much more about the computers are all crashed, everything is down, and I'm hearing less of that. Now, that could be that teachers are getting tired of complaining to me about it, or it could be that maybe the broadband is increasing and things are getting more reliable. But I will say this, you asked what's acceptable, what isn't. As reliable as the sun rising in the east, the whole yin-yang everything crashes report card week, when everybody is doing their report cards, whether it's enriched or just getting onto Edline or the grades are due tomorrow. And I've heard some principals who say, well, why did you wait till the last minute to do your report card? Well, because the kids are doing assignments up until then. You know, the kids are, you know, the quarter ends on a Friday, and they're handing in work on Friday. We're not going to tell the kids if you didn't hand in the work the week before, you don't get graded. So it's just part of the business that the kids are doing work this week, and it's going to be graded, it's going to be put in, and teachers are going to take their computer home and have to work all night because here in the building, everything's crashed. So I can't begin to answer how you get everything working, but it's getting to be kind of reliable. Report cards are due Friday, and the system will be down, you know, Thursday through the weekend.
Oh, that's a fair point, and I know our new associate superintendent of IT is back there taking notes. So you know, that's a good that's a perfect data point. You know, and certainly you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That we are not the only district where that has happened. So I'm sure there are ways that we can mitigate that, and I know he'll look at that. So thanks.
I just wanted to, I think I was asked a question, but we got to look at the context, and we are in a high stakes system. We are a cog in the wheel of a high stakes system. So the morale and the pressure that teachers feel to perform is very real. So when you have something that is not working in order to perform, which you are going to be held accountable for not even what you're doing, for what your students are doing, it's unacceptable. How much leeway does the state give us? How much leeway does the federal government give us? So all that is trickling down to the teachers and to our students as well.
Thanks.
You were looking for a percentage, is what I think you said, how much planning percentage you would want to
you know, I was just, I throw that out there only because we have these data points, and so, you know, what's the data point for inefficient time?
Yeah.
And, you know, or, you know, I mean, it happens in every industry. I don't care, you can go to aviation, you can go to any industry where things just don't work the way you want to, and many times they're time critical. You know, you can't get the airline tickets processed fast enough to get the flight out on time, whatever the case may be, right? So, but there is a built into the business model of that business, there is an acceptable window of hey, we accept that this is going to happen. So what we do is we make sure that the users understand that we understand that that's going to happen, and we don't punish for it. We don't. We make the right call to accept that as an organization, and then continue to work with our leadership to pare that down to try and get that number smaller and smaller and smaller along the way, so that it's not a pressure. That, hey, we understand that stuff's happening. We're not holding it against you. We use it as a data point to make sure we fix it and make it, you know, neck it down to as close to zero as you can. You'll never get there.
So if I looked at it just from a personal thing without looking at the data, we used to have 2 preps that were between 43 and 47 minutes long, right? Forget about before or after school, because that's just a disaster. You got kids running out, all that stuff, right? So if you look at those, I taught straight through, gave up one of my plannings both times. So I taught 7 of 7, even when we had 2 plannings. But What happened is that I will tell you that the most effective way is to give a planning per prep. Now look at this. People say, oh, you're crazy. That only gives you 43 minutes to prepare for your class, to make your grades, to check your emails, to do all that stuff. And you're talking about teaching 2 classes. When you go from American government to American history, it's huge. That would be the bar minimum, I would say, if you wanted to create an effective bell curve of where your loss of all of your achievement and stuff would occur right there. So that's about 9.4% of the average day in minutes per planning. We used to have 18.75. Now, if you got one planning all day, that's okay. But when you got a teacher stacked with multiple plannings, you're literally setting them up for failure. He's throwing worksheets at the kids because he's trying to teach the other class, and then those worksheets will never even get graded. You see what I mean? So that would be the accurate number, I would say. Without that, continue. Thank you.
Any additional board member questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate the efforts, and we look forward to working with you on solutions.
Just right here, have this off here. Just bring it. Okay.
3. After. Okay. All right, we are now at public comments. The maximum allotted time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Clarification of information presented and answers to questions specific to district business and educational matters will be posted on the school board's website under the section called For the Record. Please be reminded that profane, abusive, or slanderous speech is not permitted. I request that you speak into the microphone and state your name. Thank you. We have 3 speakers tonight under public comment in the following order: Glenn Dahmer, Dean Paterakis, and Johnette Gindling. So, Mr. Dahmer, if you would approach the podium, please.
Hello, my name is Glenn Dahmer. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm here on behalf of my son. My son is a student at Vera High School. He's in the 10th grade, and he has an IEP. And you guys just made my case for me because some of the things you just mentioned are some of the reasons why I'm here. We had an experience with his IEP. We've had several meetings, which I had to call myself. And at great expense this past summer to the taxpayers of Brevard County, we were given the opportunity to have an independent evaluation. And the person who did the evaluation gave us about 2.5 pages of suggestions of what they could do to help my son. To today, none of them have been implemented. This was done back in July. We've had, I think, about 4 IEP meetings this year. Promises were made, but nothing has been done to this date. Besides that, my son had been insulted by the person who had been running the IEP meetings last year. She's now a dean at the school, and there's a new person. And there have been many roadblocks put in my way and my son's way via his counselor. And sadly, this counselor is the only IEP counselor in the school. And so we're stuck with this counselor. We can't change counselors. He's the only one. Our schools, as in life, are only as strong as the weakest link. And in this case, the ESE and the IEP students are the weak link. And I have heard a lot of evidence recently speaking to young teachers who are strapped with a lot of IEP students. They talk about percentages. These are new teachers who have no experience. I believe some of the board members mentioned this before about the older teachers or teachers with more experience working with the AP classes. It seems to me it probably would make more sense to be the other way around. But I would gladly speak to any of you privately. I don't really want to discuss my son's issues, but this needs to be addressed sooner than later. There was a slogan at one time, no child left behind. Well, I know of at least one that's been left behind, and that would be my son. I have reached out to Disability Rights Florida and also the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. I have a letter here from the Civil Rights Office where they're very interested, and they have several points where they'd like to address the school on. Also, the Disability Rights Florida had attended my last IEP meeting, and I haven't discussed that meeting with her yet. But I can tell you one of the problems my son has is he reads well below grade level, and that was determined by this, the psychologist of the school gave some IQ tests and some reading tests. And that was determined, I believe it was last year, and there was never an offer of a reading class or anything to bring him up to grade level. He's reading at a 4th or 5th grade reading level, and he's in 10th grade classes. I suggested that maybe he could get a reading class, and they said that was outside the scope of the IEP, which makes no sense because if you're reading at a 4th grade reading level, you're not going to be very successful in 10th grade classes.
Mr. Dahmer, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your 3 minutes are up.
Okay.
I would, however, like to offer you, Dr. Thetty is in the back of the room. If you would like to connect with her before you go, she's our student services person. And we will certainly see what we can do to take care of the situation, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next up is Dean Paterakis.
Hello again. My name is Dean Paterakis, anti-corruption. Citizen watchdog. I want to apologize to Tina. I did forget that she was not endorsed by Florida Today. She was endorsed by all the other bad groups that pushed through, so I apologize. You didn't need them. You also had Sheriff Wayne Ivy's endorsement, which it's publicly known that I have such a poor opinion. I'm sorry, guys. It's not your fault that you get an elected sheriff like him. But I do want to say there's a few things that are going on here about what we just spoke about. And Andy, you just said, and it's weird how you can speak from both sides of your mouth, but you were just saying it's against the law to go against the superintendent's recommendations, and then you go and vote against the superintendent's recommendations. I just don't get it. You know, it's just more of the same. But I do know now with Matt getting this job that he and his wife will be making about $250,000 here in Brevard County Schools. And so his first assignment, I would like to get the list of the candidates that applied for this job. Also, I'm here actually to get a response. 2 months ago, or about a month ago, there was a story in Florida Today about an alleged sexual abuse case in Brevard schools. And I asked you all, I had emailed, did this alleged incident happen at Southwest? And I haven't received a response from any of you. The other thing is, about 8 months ago, I came here and spoke about a teacher that showed his, and I can't say the words, even though we say it all the time in our schools, so I'll use erect privates. And I was arrested for exposing the teacher who showed a picture of his erect privates in class, 14 to 15-year-olds. And what's really interesting is in what county would the guy who tells on a teacher that he showed his erect privates gets arrested, but the teacher who actually showed his erect privates, not arrested. Only in Brevard County, I guess. So I would like a response. I had asked all of you, is why is this teacher still employed by Brevard Schools? Thank you very much, and we'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you, Mr. Paterakis. And next up, we have Johnette Gindling. Excellent.
Good evening. I'm Johnette Gindling, the Executive Director of the Space Coast Health Foundation. And I just came tonight to share a little bit of good news with you about Head Start children and dental health care. The Space Coast Health Foundation is a funded endowment, and we encourage collaboration and provide grants to support health care solely in Brevard County. One of the focus areas for the foundation is dental care. The foundation's dental task force works with many community partners to improve dental care. Currently, our task force includes the Brevard Public Schools Head Start program, the Department of Health, Brevard Health Alliance, Eastern Florida State College, Space Coast Volunteers in Medicine, Parish Medical Center, and Delta Dental. And a special thank you to Angie Doucette from the Head Start program, who serves on the task force. One of the many projects the task force has taken on is supporting dental care for the Head Start children. Partners from the task force are providing the initial dental screening and cleaning for the Head Start children. However, the task force quickly discovered that when further treatment was discovered it was needed, many of the children did not have the coverage or the resources necessary to receive that additional dental service. Delta Dental has awarded the foundation a $10,000 grant to provide much needed assistance in covering those costs of the post-screening dental treatment for the Head Start children. And this will help with the restorative care and the extractions that they need. The foundation looks forward to continue to partner with Brevard Public Schools Head Start as we make progress to improve dental care, keeping our children healthy and in school. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of the work that you're doing for our babies. The board wishes to thank this evening's speakers. Your willingness to speak to the board is appreciated. At this time, I think we would like to take a short break, 5 minutes,
No more than
and
five.
then no more than 5, Mr. Craig says. 5-minute break, and then we will resume. That moves us into the consent agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 27 agenda items under this category, 8 with prior information.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Does any board member wish to pull any items?
Yes, please.
Mr. Craig?
F24 and F35 and 36.
F24 and F35 and 36?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get that, Pam? All right. Any other board members?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Pam, if you would please pull items F24, F35, and F36 for discussion. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of the items that were pulled for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. And the vote passes 5-0. And the vote passes 5-0. Mr. Craig, since you pulled the items, would you like to open discussion on F24?
Certainly, this will not take long. I actually did my due diligence and sent memos to each of the people that were involved that I was going to pull it, so simply because I had some questions and that I wanted to have some public explanation of. So first in F24, it's the social studies text. This is the 30-day review. It's under the new state policy. A lot of questions about, A, how parents are going to be able to access the actual text, whether that's online or whether they have to come in and look at it. And then the process for any concerns and how they're going to do that, and who gets to see the results of that.
I have, Mr. Craig, I have brought my expert, Tara Taylor, and she's
Thank you,
going to
Tara.
explain
Sorry.
that process.
Sorry to make you be
expert
here.
lightly.
I'm sorry to make you be here.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Blackburn. This is very, I can see the public confusion because it is brand new language and it's very different. Typically, we put things out for public review prior to approval. So this language states that once there's approval, that 30-day window begins that very next day. And during that time, parents will have access to, they can come in and look. I have Miss Ehrenstoff, she's our social studies resource teacher, so she's been meeting the public if they need to review, if they want to review hard copies. But the digital links and the sign-ins, those were released to schools on December 9th to get out to their communities. And then we plan to, if these are in fact improved, that we would release those again to all parents again tomorrow. We do realize that we're sending them out to schools to use a variety of their tools, but we've also looked at some district tools beginning tomorrow to ensure that every Brevard parent has access to that. If a parent were to want to petition something during that 30-day window, if you go onto our district website, we have 2 routes in which they can find that form. And Pam helped us with that to make it very easy for parents, but we also have a link in that communication we've been sending out to schools so that parents can simply click right there and find that petition form. So then we have to release the materials. The language says we have 7 days to release that instructional materials prior to the petition public hearing. We've already released all of that. So we have gone well ahead of that 7 days. They've had that information, I believe, since the end of November, or I know specifically December 9th. So that is all there, but we plan to release it again tomorrow upon approval because we want this to be as transparent as possible. And then those petition forms, if parents do submit those, they'll go to Ms. Escobar, and then the public hearing would then happen at that point.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can you make sure, do you mind sending us a link or whatever you're going to, however that is going to be, like it's going to be on the website or whatever, just so that the people that have contacted us, I can
Yes, in fact, that
push it out to them?
attachment that you received today, if you scroll through to the charts where it has that username information,
Okay.
there's a table in there. If you email that out, those links should be live. And so that if you email that to any parents, they could click right on there. And it has the login information there as well.
And that's going to be for both elementary and secondary?
That is, what you have right now is for elementary. I believe when secondary gets to that point, they will be releasing that exact same information.
Okay, thank you. I had one more question on that, sorry. So I looked at, obviously the purchase numbers and everything through there. So do we offer it will it be offered electronically? Will a student be able to access this textbook utilizing a smartphone or a tablet if they so choose?
There is text that they can get through the digital. All of them come with a digital component. With the K-5 Studies Weekly option, which is our option for K-5, that is actually a newsprint. It's not a textbook, it's a newsprint articles that they work through as their tool, but there are digital access with even that program. And then the options for both 5th and then 2 options for 6th grade also include a digital. So they have in those, they have a hard textbook, but then there's a digital resource that has a lot of components to it as far as the text.
And are the students required to take a physical textbook to actually receive one? Or if they say, hey, I would rather just use electronic, do we allow them to do that?
Well, I'm going to speak to allow, we could, but if we want to look at what is best for children, we know that if students are learning those comprehension skills more, we look at that social studies content piece, and of course they could get that digitally. But there's a lot of research that says if students have that text in their hand, it doesn't take away from being able to comprehend that tool. So I believe, and I would have to get back with you on can we allow it. But I will say, in looking at what's best for children, we want them to have that digital access, and if they, have a tool at home and they would like to pull that text up, I think that is obviously an at-home choice, but I think we also want every student in Brevard to have the text. So if your question is stemming from, do they have that access to avoid purchasing the text, the digital comes along as a combination with the purchase of the text.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Deskovich?
Did you want to add on to what secondary is doing?
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love it. Thank you, Robin.
The secondary process is identical to what she explained to you, but it's on a different timeline. So some of those things haven't occurred yet.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
I have concerns about getting this information out to our parents. I've talked to Ms. Klein already, and she said she disseminated it through the schools, but I found it's not reaching parents, and I'm not sure what the solution to that is. I've been proactive. I got the information from her, sent it to all my email contacts, put it on my social media, and people were surprised, and it's already been ongoing for a while. I feel like there's a communication breakdown somewhere. So what can we do now to get this out for these 30 days? Really get it out, not kind of get it out. Links on our website.
So Tara and I discussed that today, and we're going to get our friend Deborah Foley and use Peach Jar to get that out. And also, we talked about putting a link on our district website as well. And then highly encourage every elementary principal to take action appropriately tomorrow. So that's our plan after you and I talked again yesterday, that it's just not getting where it needs to be.
The link on our district website, does that mean on the front or?
Well, that's what we were trying to get, a banner on the front.
That would
yeah.
be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So that's our plan after 2 o'clock today, I think.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Susan?
Is there any way we can put that on the Edline accounts? So that when, there's a link there? I get my daughter's stuff. Can we have it inside there?
We can.
That would be, because I know I check that more than sometimes that email that they have.
Right. We can work on with Russell and the team and with Deborah and
See if you can do that.
see what else we can do. I know that I have every elementary school Blackboard Connect link on my phone, so all 55, when they send something, I read every one of them. So we can make that so it goes out through Blackboard as well. So we'll work on a plan for tomorrow.
And then on those electronic copies that students are going in, is that going to be able to be repeated, or do we pay every year for those? You see, we do that with our college textbooks, right? So do we do that with these?
And I want to get back with you with the actual, because I'm recalling my best memory, but the newsprint K5 option, that is, we pay the price, but those are consumable and would be replaced each year. So that digital piece is a component of ordering. It's kind of like a package when you
Yeah, I
work with
know.
the publishers, you buy this, you get
Yeah,
this.
but we will be paying for them every year.
Yes.
For access points and new numbers for the kids and everything else.
Yes, with
Okay.
the Studies Weekly K5, that is the newsprint, we would be ordering. With the textbook, for every textbook you order, you get the technology packages.
And that's good till we renew for the textbook, digital copy per kid.
Until the next, when you say renew, do you mean the next adoption?
Next
That would be
edition.
correct. Every time we
Beautiful.
buy the book, we get the package.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jan.
All right, I will take a motion on that item.
Move to approve F24.
Moved by Mr. Craig. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Susan. Please vote. All right, Mr. Craig, that brings us to F35.
Brought these both, and again, I emailed Dane, and thank you, Sue, for being here. You probably noticed, so it's the health and wellness centers. That's why they're both large discrepancy in cost between the two. And for public knowledge, I just want to make sure that that is known why there is such a really large discrepancy in cost. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sue Hand, Director of Planning and Project Management. The difference in cost is due to the fact that at the Jackson site, we have to build a parking lot, and at the central site, we are using the existing parking lot. So that's really the most of the difference in the price.
Okay. And I guess then that would lead me to the question of, was that site chosen because, was there anywhere else to put it?
Well, there were, excuse me, a number of choices in terms of where we can put the clinic, but these sites were chosen based upon their accessibility to our students and teachers, and so, I'm sorry, our faculty and our employees, and we wanted to make sure that we optimize those locations. We did look at some of the civil engineering trade-offs on some of the sites, but
Right.
Generally speaking, I think these are the optimum places for serviceability reasons, and we've tried to minimize the cost, but the one at Jackson did require some additional work on the parking lot.
Okay, so when you say you're building a new parking lot, does that mean there's actual parking associated with it, or this is just
Yes.
a pad that you're putting, you have to build the pad to put it on?
The pad is the same for both. This is actual parking spaces.
Okay.
So we're not using the parking spaces at the school. We have to build parking spaces to support the clinic at Jackson.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Move to approve F35 and F36.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Susan on F35 and F36. PM, do you need a separate vote on those?
Could I please?
Absolutely.
Move to
So-
approve. Move to approve F35.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Susan to approve F35. Please vote. Approved
Move to-
5-0.
Move to approve F36.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Susan to approve F36. No discussion, please vote.
Just 1 moment.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, no, it's not okay. It's gonna be okay.
And motion passes 5-0. We will move on to the action agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 3 items for your consideration. First is item G40, which is purchasing solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Susan. Any discussion? Please vote. Approved 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
And item G41 is on department school initiated agreements.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion? Please vote. Approved 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G42 is to hold a public hearing to approve the Brevard Public Schools Student Progression Plan for the 2016-2017 school year.
The public hearing is now declared open. The public hearing is now declared open. Are there any persons who wish to speak to this issue? Are there any persons wishing to speak to this issue? Okay. Hearing no speakers, I now declare the public hearing closed. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Move to approve by Mr. Susan, second by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. Passes 5-0.
Can I say something, Mr. Post? I should have discussed, but it's not, it wouldn't affect anybody's vote. But I just want to say it publicly, because I've heard people have reached out to me and asked about the timing of it. And we talked to Ms. Klein yesterday or the day before about making sure next year, she suggested moving it, this should be handled by September. We're approving the student progression plan for the past year right now. That should be outlined earlier. So the plans are in the future to have this much earlier on our agenda.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Duskovich. We will move on to the information agenda, which includes items for board review and will be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 7 items under the information category.
Does any member wish to discuss anything on the information agenda?
H48.
H48. Mr. Ziegler.
H48 is a recommendation to forgive some loans for various items. We've discussed this before. Thank you for staff for doing the research and bringing this forward to the board. I would like to throw out a few points for the board to consider before this moves next meeting to consent. And that is on the Melbourne High School and Palm Bay High School synthetic turf loan. There's some calculations in here, if you've all looked at it, on issuing some credit towards existing payments of the loan, going back, calculating the balance, and then creating a new annual payment based on the number of years of life left in the loan. And good job. It all makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of relief for the schools. My concern is a couple-fold. At previous discussion at a board meeting prior to our new board members joining us, for the sake of Palm Bay High School, apparently Mrs. Nisi, prior board member, had been involved in the conversations. And interesting enough, she recalled the conversations, including the savings from existing field maintenance covering the loan payments. Unfortunately, there's no documentation to that effect that was part of the plan. Odd. Further conversations, I ran into the athletic director at Melbourne High School, who then told me the same thing. And I was like, well, that's odd, but we have no documentation to state that. And he said, well, yeah, that's because the plan was, At that point in time, and if you look at the documentation provided to us, the area superintendent, Dr. Tom McIntyre, or I should say the late Dr. Tom McIntyre, had a plan that he was going to come before the board and ask the board to waive the fee every year. Unfortunately, in 2008, Dr. McIntyre passed away, and so along with that, there went the plan to ask the board to waive the fee year after year. Why it was done like that, I don't know, but that was consistent with what Mrs. Nisi said. And so, number one, if you look at the partnership agreement for school-initiated projects attached to this item, it does make reference to a plan for repayment, but I don't see a document that actually speaks to that detail. Unless I'm missing something, I don't really see what that plan was. The document further outlines, interestingly enough, a calculation of field maintenance back at that point in time, which I think came to about $29,700 a year, and that agenda item speaks to saving the district a significant amount of money by doing this, which almost implies that it's there was logic to going down this road because it was going to reduce costs to the district, which kind of also contradicted the conversation at the time about actually repaying a loan. It almost didn't make sense the way this was worded. Nevertheless, that's where we are. We don't have documentation to it. So with that thought, and to give further consideration to the calculation for this, I take issue in the $12,800 credit per year for 12 years because the calculation actually comes from the cost calculated by staff of $16,751.59, which includes the labor portion. The maintenance does include labor as well as materials. The $12,800 is apparently materials only, discounting the labor portion. So I would advocate that we recalculate based on the $16,751.59, which includes labor. It's a logical expense to the district, and that's what we were spending, and that's what we're saving. The argument against the labor was, as well, those people are, well, may not be doing field maintenance. They're doing something elsewhere in the district. Well, but that's not that school's fault that we still employ people that do work elsewhere in the district. That labor is applicable to that field. So I would ask that we recalculate those amounts based on that, which interestingly enough would wipe out the debt to Palm Bay High School and reduce the remaining debt to Melbourne High School to $32,563.90 and an annual payment over 4 years of $8,140.92, understanding of course, they still have an annual maintenance of close to $5,000, which you'd think maybe we would be paying. John brought this up when we discovered that it's kind of like double damage. They were not only paying for the field, they were paying the maintenance. It's like the district got completely off the hook for maintenance. I'm almost wondering whether we should have been crediting them the maintenance on top of that. I mean, I would personally advocate of wiping out both of them, but as a minimum, based on the history of how this came about, and based on that, I believe labor is part of that cost, that it should be recalculated, including the labor cost. And I would like this board to give staff direction to recalculate.
I have no problem having them recalculated. I would have to do a lot deeper dive into it to see whether or not I agree with that. I can tell you wholeheartedly I cannot support something based on just a verbal from a former board member and somebody that I have no idea who that is. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
That's why I'm asking for
so I would like to see
numbers.
I would like
Go
to
by
see
the
the
numbers.
numbers and see how that actually fleshes out and if that makes sense. I think you've already done some of that, but yeah, if staff could do that, that'd be great, and then we can take a harder turn at it.
Mr. Susan.
Weren't the numbers already done? We've got the labor done, and we've got that. The only question is are we going to include the labor? Is that what the...
That's really the question. The labor number is stated
set.
in there.
Dane came up with it. They worked it out. So I guess the argument would be that portion of it's already taken care of. So the argument would be they've already done that. It would be more of, do we include the labor?
Labor, that's really the question.
That would be it. So when you were saying, that agreement that happened with some old person that died, that's one thing. But what we're doing now is are we going to credit them 16 or 12 grand based on, are we going to include labor or not? That's all.
Correct.
And it's something that I'm in favor of also because on top of that, they had the $5,000 in order to do it. And I'll tell you, I did a lot more research on this. The cost alone of the injuries on natural grass compared to the turf is half. So on turf, it's half of the amount of people get injuries with the new turf. And that's out of Dr. Michael Myers, Department of Health and Human Services out of Montana. There's all kinds of other costs that are here that when they went to that move that we save money on with risk management and everything else. So if you want to start including more to it, we can.
Dr. Mullins, could you approach so I can ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So on the information that you provided us, the $12,800 per year was simply for the cost of materials to maintain the field, is that correct?
That's correct.
And have we verified that the actual cost when we include labor is $16,000 and some dollars?
Mr. Theodore provided that information directly to me.
Okay, so that would mean that the actual labor for the maintenance is $3,200 per year?
$3,940.
About $3,900. $3,940, $3,940.79.
Okay. Mr. Craig?
So I'm sorry, I'm confused. So what is the estimated, I mean, there's a huge window there of $4,000 to $6,000. I can't believe that it's that wide of a window for the annual maintenance fee for maintaining the synthetic turf. What is that?
It's my understanding that annually the school has contracted service come out. They inspect the field. They replace the rubber pellets that make up the surface of the field, and they do any repairs that may be needed. So depending on the damage to the field, it can cause a range in the cost to the school.
Okay, and what is the maintenance our people do?
We don't provide any maintenance to an AstroTurf field right now. And do you mean what is our maintenance to a regular sod field? I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's the 3,400?
Yeah.
The third.
I know.
So the estimated. Let me see
The
if I can
estimated
clarify.
maintenance cost is?
The estimated maintenance cost for Brevard Public Schools to maintain a high school football field
Right.
is $16,751.59. $12,811 of that is product, materials, fertilizers,
Oh, I see. Okay.
and those types of things. Approximately $3,900 of that is the actual labor to service the field.
That's what you're asking. And I can tell you what that is.
Okay, so, and that is, we're confident that that is just for that field? It's not for like the practice fields around it that are grass and, I mean.
I'd have to reach it. Yes, that is correct. That is
Okay.
for the competitive football field.
Okay.
Ms. Deskovich?
I'm not sure if this is for you or Penny or whom, but I have no problem. I feel like as a district, we probably should cover these things should have covered maybe in the first place. So I have no problem with this. I do wonder what, if we're receiving these payments now, are we going to be in a bind somewhere, not receiving them? Like, where is this money going now? Is it just going into a general fund, and now we can't afford, something else?
At one time, we did have this debt on our books, and we were required to go ahead and write it off, so we've expensed it within our district. The money then comes back to refund what we had to show as an expense within the general fund. So it would be, not receiving the payment would be loss of income into the general fund.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. So, I mean, so how much overall are we now not going to receive, and is that going to really impact us? That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Well, on an annual basis.
Yes, on an annual basis.
it's,
Sorry, I see
The total over the life of the.
Yeah, the annual payment's roughly $25,000 a year. Over the life of the loan, it's about $333,000 total. But on an individual year, it's a smaller amount.
Thank you.
If I may, I think where you're going, because I asked the same question, is if that is recognized revenue, income, does it impact part of the budget on the expense side?
That's exactly that.
Right, and the answer is no, that is not showing as incoming revenue that is then budgeted as an expense on the other side.
Okay.
So that's what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to short somewhere else.
Exactly, that was my
because
concern.
of that, correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ziegler, we do book that as income coming into the system.
I asked you this question. I'm not making it. We went over that. So maybe it's changed. But when because I asked the same question, I want to know if it was shorting.
There'd be nowhere else for you to put it.
Question. Well, but I was told it just falls to the bottom line. It's not going to impact it's not going to impact somebody's budget.
It's not budgeted for as part of our budget. We don't budget that receipt coming in, but we do have that money actually come into the general fund, and it does impact available funding for the district during the year. So we do not budget the income coming in, but when it comes in, it is utilized in the district in some way.
And the flip side to that is it frees money up in the schools, right? Now Mel High and Palm Bay High would have that money back to do what they do.
And a quick little history on how this, I even found out about this is we approved lacrosse to be a sport in our district, and then found out at Mel High lacrosse actually has to pay for field usage, which I didn't understand until then I found out it was because they were using the AstroTurf field, and then I found out that they had to pay because there was a loan on it. That's how this all came about.
Which is rightfully so, because lacrosse wears those fields out more than any other sport, even football. Yeah, I coached it. I believe in it, but it does.
Well, if you'd stay on your feet when you play a sport, Mr. Susan, it wouldn't wear the feet. It
Watch
wouldn't
me
wear
play
the field
rugby.
out.
I don't ever go down.
So would we, as a board, like to provide some direction to Dr. Mullins for an edit on this recommendation prior to the next meeting where it comes for consent?
Can we just make a motion to up it from the 12 to the 16, put it on? so that
This is
the
just
next
an
time-
information item,
Just
so
we
there's
don't,
no,
we don't
there's
have to
no
make a
motion.
motion, we just have to give direction that we'd like labor included.
And we can just vote on it and finalize it.
Dr. Mullins, why did you not include labor with this number? Were you just being conservative for conservative sake, or you don't believe that should be in there? I mean, in your opinion?
Ultimately, it was to acknowledge the direct savings to the district for the schools that have the AstroTurf. The labor is not a direct savings because, as was described by Mr. Ziegler, those staff are repurposed or providing, in some instances, more timely service and response to schools of like service, our other fields, baseball, practice fields, and so on. So it was simply a matter of it was a direct real savings to the district, and we felt like after discussion with the focus group that was an appropriate pass along to the schools.
Dr. Mullins, point of clarification, and I think I asked you this question when we had our discussion on this item, but am I correct in recalling that the principals impacted by this recommendation were part of your committee discussion?
Yes.
So the principals at Palm Bay and Melbourne were comfortable with your recommendation?
Yes.
At any point in time, did the discussion come up about the labor cost?
Well, in our focus group, we discussed it. I presented all of the numbers to the principals, so they were aware of the direct cost or direct savings and the labor cost of the district and not as a direct savings, so that was part of the discussion. But the original discussion actually included a lesser credit to the schools, but after further discussion, we agreed that we would increase it to the full direct savings to the district.
Okay, so your committee actually was not in favor of including that 3,900.
That's not true.
I don't know if I'd go so far to say they weren't in favor. They were trying to find a reasonable recommendation to the board and felt like 12.8 was reasonable.
So I'm going to ask this question. Mr. Ziegler has mentioned numerous times that folks think that they know what the board wants, and so they try to give us what we want, kind of reading our mind, if you will. So on your gut feeling, did the committee feel like, rightfully so, they should get the full $16,751, but if they brought it to the board would scoff at it? Or did they feel like, do you see what I'm getting at? I don't want this to be a situation where they really felt like it should be the 16,000, but they don't want to upset by the board by bringing the 16,000 forward as a recommendation?
That's a tough question to answer, because interestingly, everyone in the room as part of that conversation had nothing to do with the original agreement that they were then now obligated to pay back. So I think they were appreciative of just even the dialogue of suggesting that we revisit this potential former conversation with area superintendents and principals and board members and so on. I honestly, I'm certain they wouldn't be disappointed if there was reconsideration of additional forgiveness. But at the same time, I don't think it'd be fair for me to say that they were expecting the full 16,000.
I see you, Mr. Susan. I'm coming to you, I promise. So let me ask you this then, just to make sure, because I want to be very cognizant of pulling people into a committee to make a decision and then us tossing the committee decision out the window. If we, as a board, give you the direction to include the $3,900 in the fee, are there any schools that would be a negative to? So are there schools, for example, that perhaps had they been given the full $16,000 credit, we would owe them money and they would feel slighted because we didn't? Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
I just want to make sure that if that recommendation comes forward, that we are not disadvantaging anyone in the process.
The only schools that currently have the AstroTurf field are Palm Bay and Melbourne. We are in the process of pursuing an AstroTurf field for Merritt Island High School based on recent legislation. So there would be some clarification needed. Would the 16,000, the additional 3,900, be applied to future schools who find, if you recall, the recommendation includes what do we not only do now from the past, but what do we do now moving forward? And it includes the recommendation originally included a $12,800 credit annually to schools who acquire an AstroTurf field. So I'd ask for additional clarification. Would that include the $3,900 for those future schools? But no, there would be no, apologies needed to other schools for past repayments and that sort of thing. It's isolated to these two schools at this time.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Susan.
The other piece to it is that in a lot of cases, the principals are not aware of how much their field costs to work. That's Dane. In all the schools that I've ever been at, if you went up to them and said, honestly, give me an honest picture of how much it costs, they really would have no idea. So looking at Dane, I think that it's exactly what he said. If you told each one of them, this is where we're going, they'd be ecstatic. But they were nervous about asking for the full amount. They figured it would pass with that. That's all.
Ms. Deskovich.
Back to my good friend Penny. Do you have an opinion on the difference of in our? I'm sorry, John. Oh no. I didn't know if you had an input with it. Do you have an opinion on the two? Does it matter? Is it going to affect us one way or the other? I feel like I have to run everything by you when it comes to financial stuff.
I appreciate that. I don't have an opinion between the 12 and the 6. My concerns more is future and cost as it comes time to replace and how we're going to obtain the funds to replace these fields, because these two particular fields are getting very close to the end of their life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of any place we have the funding for that. So between 12 to 16,
I don't have a big difference one way or the other. I do appreciate that the principals were looking at the fact that the 12.8 is actual cost savings to the district, cash savings, where labor, we continue to pay it, but I don't have a big opinion one way or the other.
So do we have to decide for the, thank you, do we have to decide what the guidance for the future too?
No, not right
tonight?
now. This
Okay.
is just on this item.
What we need to do, Ms. Deskovich, is if we would like for Dr. Mullins to alter his recommendation for the next meeting, we need to provide some agreeable direction to him to do so. We won't be voting on this item tonight, but if we're wanting him to make changes to what he's presenting, we need to, as a team, give him direction to do so and what we're looking for.
You didn't recommend anything on the future in this? I have to reread it.
The future practice is included in the recommendation,
It is
yes.
included, so we would have to kind of give direction on that also.
Mr. Ziegler and then Mr. Craig.
To answer your question about the principals, because I asked them, and as expected, similar to what you expected, is any relief, there's relief. They didn't want to rock the boat. But I'd like to also remind you that per the original calculation when they went into this agreement, they estimated field maintenance at $29,700. Before I ever brought this subject up, I asked for a calculation on average on our regular field maintenance. It came up at $19,000. Then when we got down to this situation, we whittled it down. We were at $16,700 and then $12,800. So just to give you a little history, I can't imagine that somewhere along, some of those numbers must be wrong somewhere, but it doesn't matter. I just want to include labor at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. Mr. Craig.
A lot of discussion on an information item. I appreciate everybody's comments. I think listening to both what y'all say, the thing that sticks out in my mind is this is really just comes down to direct and indirect costs, and I think it would set us in a bad precedent if we start compensating for indirect costs, because that opens up a whole different can of worms in a variety of other ways. And it's not just for field maintenance, it could be for a variety of different things that we build. It could go all the way into the school-initiated projects. It could go into a variety of things. So to me, the safest and best way is exactly what you suggested. It's direct cost. We know the direct cost. And that's what we should be covering, because indirect costs are just that. They're indirect costs, and they're called that for a reason. And I think we open ourselves up to a lot more discussion, and probably not a road that I'm comfortable going down. So my recommendation would be to stick with, after all that, with what you said.
Mr. Ziegler.
I just support labor. I guess we need to see what each board member wants to do. I support adding labor.
Support it too.
I kind of support a hybrid. I have no problem with the waiving the indirect, which I know is kind of haphazard, but I'd like to see these schools get into a position where they can start working on future fields and what they're going to need to, if you say it's time for them to start looking at it. But I don't want to set the precedent, like Mr. Craig said. So if we could, in a way, help them out to now and then not set a precedent, but set guidance for the future back at the actual cost, that's kind of where I am.
And that was kind of what I was thinking as well, just to find a middle point between the perspectives. I don't necessarily have an issue with giving credit for the labor going backward, but I think that we should make it clear going forward that it's only going to be on direct costs that we can validate, and that everything has to be documented appropriately. Mr. Susan.
And those direct costs may go up, as costs always do, right? So that may change. And when you say not going back or going forward, we still include their payments that they still have to make.
Correct.
Because we have to
They still have
credit them
payments.
forward. So technically, we are moving forward anyway.
Right.
On future, I think the vision there is on future arrangements that we may make.
Right.
We will only consider direct costs.
And
Is
in
that
the
kind of what you were
recommendation, it
thinking?
does acknowledge that there may be need for periodic readjustment of additional costs and so on, because they may change.
So, Mr. Craig, would you be comfortable with that recommendation? Dr. Mullins, I think you have direction.
Got it.
Thank you, sir.
Can,
I was going to say, what's his opinion?
well,
Dr. Blackburn.
It's his birthday, you know.
We're not putting forward
clearly, I'm definitely in favor of the recommendation, or else, I wouldn't have brought it forward for some of the reasons that have been talked about today. But just to give everyone, especially some of the new board members, additional context, this was an issue of debt that we all inherited, and staff was asked to take a look at it. In doing the research, regardless of the opinions on whether or not school districts should be in the habit of issuing debt out to their schools, that's a highly debatable issue. The reality is it happened. It was board approved. Those principals at the time signed off on the agreements of the loans. The board at the time signed off on the agreements of the loans. So I will tell you quite honestly, from a conservative standpoint, I started the day out with letting bygones be bygones. It was a deal. All empowered people freely signed off. They have those fields. Here are the terms. Go forward. You do that. In the future, we would reconsider, how we fund facility upgrades, knowing that the inequities that exist across the system are pretty wide, in that some schools took out loans to do things. We talked about the concession stand, band, uniforms, et cetera. Some schools took out loans. Some schools saved up, funded it themselves. Some schools received donations, and some schools didn't get anything. So the inequities are, so I went down this road with great hesitation. But thanks to staff, thanks to the impacted principals, I think they produced a recommendation that is both forgiving and rational, right? The whole direct and indirect costs, that's my opinion as well, that when you're talking about indirect costs, there are a lot more variables there. I would appreciate that if the board decided that we need to include those indirect costs, that we do more than just consensus, and the board actually motion, second, direct staff and I to do that. Because, I think I got consensus and know what it, but there's nothing more explicit than your vote. My thoughts.
No, I think what he's saying is that when it comes to a action item next time, that you move to amend it the appropriate way that you want, so that it's on record as if that's, I think that's what you're saying.
Right, you can do it now. Give me direction now.
Yeah, I don't think we can actually.
I don't think that.
I don't think we can make a motion to give direction. I think there actually has to be an action performed. But what we can do is you can keep it the same way, and we can have language that's already ready to be amended to that motion at the appropriate time, and then have the discussion.
If there's clear, I think these microphones time out on us. I think
They do.
Yeah. I think if there's consensus, which is the way we've always done everything, they bring it back based on consensus. I think that it's always been clear direction in the future. I'm not sure what the difference is. I don't think there's any harm, Mr. Beislein, in making a motion at this point, is there? If that makes everybody happy, I don't think there's any harm in it.
No, you can make a motion to have the information item changed and brought back in a different way. I think that's what the superintendent's saying.
Yeah. Time down again. No, I'm fine with that, although it's never been the protocol of the board, but if the board wants to do it, I'm okay with that.
Harold, can we vote on it now?
Sure you can.
Well, let's do it.
No, not on this.
No.
Not on this item, on bringing us back. The motion would be, I move to include labor in the calculation.
Harold, could we just vote the whole thing through right now?
No.
Okay. Then whatever we got to do, let's do it.
So I move we include labor in the calculation.
Second.
Mr. Ziegler has moved that we include labor in the calculation on the debt repayment. Mr. Susan has seconded. We will need a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
That needs to be a clearer motion, I think, as I'm thinking about it, because
What do you mean, clear?
because the motion was the motion that you made was to include labor in the calculation, but it didn't specify if we were including labor in the Dr. Blackburn?
That's the direction he needs, is to
Can we-
include the
well,
labor figure. I think we're getting- we're
Would
getting
you
nitty-gritty
be
here.
comfortable with us giving direction for Dr. Mullins to bring back the recommendation at the next meeting with the inclusion of the direction we're giving him this evening? My concern is otherwise, I don't know that we are going to, it would be painful for us to sit here and draft the language for what we are motioning to be clear at this point in time. But we could most certainly, if Dr. Mullins brings it back to us with the intent that we have given him, then we will have an absolute concrete vote on it at the next meeting. Does that make sense?
It does.
Are you comfortable with that? Because I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation, but I also don't want us to vote on a motion that's a sloppy, not getting across what we want motion.
So in the spirit of what was discussed here earlier, right, the board asked whether or not principals brought recommendations that they felt the board wanted to approve versus the recommendation that they felt was most appropriate given the information they had. So I'm kind of in the same situation. Am I being asked to bring a recommendation that I think the board will approve, or am I being asked to bring a recommendation that I think is most prudent? And if I'm being asked to bring a recommendation opposite or different than what I think is most prudent, then I'd like direction to do that.
Got it.
Which is why I go back, yeah, it just needs to be amended at the time. I mean,
Right.
It's his agenda, so.
So, excellent point, Dr. Blackburn, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. So I think the way that we need to move forward then is to wait for it to come for action at the next meeting, and we will, in the meantime, Mr. Ziegler, since you're bringing the motion forward, if you would please work.
I'd like to caution the board on doing that. We've never done that in the past. We've given direction on what we were interested in being brought back to us. You would basically be cutting off all direction as a protocol for future information items. We've never operated that way. And so they would be setting a precedence, which I think would be a mistake. We give direction by consensus. We don't say, okay, we're just going to make a motion at the, there are a lot of times we change the direction and give consensus. Bring us this back, look at that, modify this text, fix this. This would be unprecedented to do it that way.
For us to amend the motion
Right.
on
We should be able to give direction as to what we're looking for. That's why it's an informational item. It's brought to us, we discuss it, we would discuss what modifications need to be made, we give direction, and they go forth. It's always the way it's been done. Board's welcome to change protocol, but be careful before you change protocol, because then that applies to everything.
I don't know that we're changing protocol by changing the way that we are doing it on this particular item, just to make sure that we are clear. My concern, Mr. Ziegler, and this is where I'm coming from on this, there is so much muddy water associated with this particular item that I really want to make sure that we are completely clear and everything is well documented as we move forward on the issue, because there has been so much in the past that has not been done correctly. So for me anyway, that's why I am most comfortable amending the recommendation at the next meeting with clear language in a motion that you can bring forward at the next meeting with that clear language, as opposed to being concerned that there's going to be any confusion as to what our expectation is.
So then that leads us back to the confusion of the fact that we actually took a vote on something and gave clear direction. So now how do we
voted
undo
it,
that?
and there's
How do
one
we undo?
last. That's what's on the table
So then how do
right
we undo that?
Well, I can undo my approval on the motion. I can bring it back and undo my approval on the motion, and then the motion would fail, and then we wouldn't go anywhere.
I think once the motion is complete, I don't think you can just go back and pull a vote. Can you?
On the prevailing,
Well, yeah, you can.
can
but
bring
this-
it back
This is,
for-
this is on the information agenda
Right.
because it's,
Shouldn't
the,
have done it
the intent is for to bring something, superintendent's recommendation is for the board to look at prior to the time that they're going to actually vote on it as an action item or a consent item, so you can have this discussion. So that's the purpose of an information agenda.
correct. I think the concern, Mr. Beislein, is there was a motion.
Well, yeah, if you made a motion to ask the superintendent to bring back an agenda item different from what is on information, and he does that, and you don't like it, you don't have to pass it. If that's what you're saying, Misty, isn't it? If you vote on it, if you vote today to have that done, and it comes back and you don't like it, you don't approve it, the language is what you like.
Which,
But I understand, I think the issue is, Andy, with the consensus businesses, it might come back different than what, the language might come back different than what you guys actually mean when you look at the language. Is that fair?
Yes, I would agree that that's the concern. My concern is that there was a motion, as we were in this discussion, there was a motion put forth. It was seconded, it was put forth by Mr. Ziegler, it was seconded by Mr. Susan, we took a vote. There were 3 in support, there were 2 opposed. There was 1 opposed, one abstained, it was a voice vote, we didn't. And then as we were in that process, I realized that the motion that had been put forward didn't spell out what we needed it to spell out to ensure that we had accuracy in the direction we were
I
providing.
think and I think that's what your concern is, that it might come back different than what you intended to come back, 'cause you haven't seen the language. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Card.
So, I know we're, but this is actually something that I think, we need to discuss even further from a governance standpoint at our workshop. The way it's always been done is not good governance. It's just not. It's not the way it's done. It's not the way a professional meeting run by Robert's Rules actually proceeds. Dr. Blackburn is exactly right. He brings the agenda to us. If you want to put an extra item on the agenda, that can be done. You can also make a motion to bring new business to the board. By the consensus issue, it clouds the direction because we don't give specific, we give verbal, and it's not done in the exact method that would provide the exact language that you're looking for. Mr. Beislein hits the nail right on the head. You don't know what you're going to get back, and then we start going back and forth again. It goes back to good governance and the fact that we need to follow the prescribed procedures on how to do something like this. The right way to do it is have this discussion. Either Mr. Ziegler puts a second motion on the next agenda, and the first one that Dr. Blackburn would have on there would be voted down, and then Mr. Ziegler's motion would either pass or whatever, or the superintendent's motion would be, as an action item, be voted down, and then staff would be directed to go back and recalculate it and bring it back with different language at that time. That's the way the governance process is supposed to work, not by consensus, not by a head nod, and, hey, you need to go change this.
So
I understand
what's
that's the way
point-
it's always been done.
what's the
The
point
way
of
it's always been done is
information?
not right.
What's the point of information?
The point of information is to have the discussion so that you know
But
what's
nothing,
coming
but we can't give
forward.
direction. You're saying we can't give direction from discussion. If we're going to have information, we're going to have discussion, and from that discussion, the board gives direction, but you're saying we can't give direction, that belabors the issue, because then you got to go through repetitive iterations. If we need information, we should be able to give information. Say, bring it back. What does this look like? We're giving direction. We're asking for more information. If we can't do that during information, we shouldn't even be talking about informational items.
No, what you've asked for is more information on the item, not to change the item. That's the difference. He writes the agenda. He owns the agenda by governance rules. He owns the agenda.
Actually, a chair owns the agenda.
No, he owns the writing of the agenda. The chair owns the execution of the agenda. Big difference.
I disagree.
So as managing the execution of the agenda.
I disagree.
We can certainly have additional discussion about this process at our upcoming board retreat, and I think that would be perfectly appropriate for us to get into that discussion at that point. I think at this point, we still have some agenda work to get through. We have staff that has had a very long day and is probably ready to get home. And so my request would be, Mr. Ziegler, that if you would please bring for the next meeting an amended motion with the verbiage that provides the direction that we discussed this evening. Then when this item comes up for action at the next meeting, we can amend the motion, approve the motion as you put it forth, but we can ensure that we have our language clear there.
Okay, so at the next meeting, we would need staff to also present us with the adjusted figures so that I can make the motion and you all understand that the figures have been validated, as opposed to just taking my word for it.
Well, I
So
think
we would
those,
need verification at that point in time, too.
I think
That's
those
fine.
figures were validated tonight by Dr. Mullins.
Then the motion was pretty accurate then. Okay. Any way you all want to do it. I think we're making an ordeal out of something really simple.
My concern with the motion was that it did not specify that we were incorporating the indirect cost of maintenance on the field for existing loans. We were not incorporating indirect costs going forward. I think there was a lot that was left out of that as it came forward. So
There seems to be an assumption there's going to be a going forward with future loans. If I recall correctly, Mrs. Zurcher, is that we got dinged pretty good by the Attorney General for having loans in the first place, and the state very much shuns upon loans to schools.
We were dinged for recording a loan on our accounting records. We can still pay for something in advance and show it as an expense for the district and have the school pay us back. We cannot record it as a receivable due from the school on our fund accounting.
Okay, so it was a error in accounting practice.
Correct.
We didn't, okay.
They did not agree with us recording it as a receivable because it is our school. It is part of the district.
And Mr. Ziegler, while I completely get where you're coming from on that, my concern is, well, I don't think we necessarily support going into future loans, was
Agreed.
what you were just saying about setting a precedent. If we do it here and don't delineate that this is an exception that we're doing, then the expectation is we've set a precedent going forward should there be that situation again. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that the lines are clear.
Okay.
So are you good with bringing back the amended motion?
Well, let's move on.
Thank you, sir. Okay, nothing else needs to be addressed on the information agenda? Very good. Then we are now at board member reports and the discussion point section. And who would like to go first with board member reports?
I can.
Ms. Deskovich.
I don't have much of a report, but I don't even know if this is the right time to bring it up. I'm still on the learning curve. I have concerns about our agendas and when we get them and how much changes by the time we're here. And yeah, I start working through it. We get it 2 weeks in advance. I start working through it. And then, the last 48 hours, I feel like I've been inundated with changes. And then I have to go back and refigure out which changed. And I would like to, set, and maybe this is something we do in our retreat, but that's something I am asking you, Misty, to look at and lay down the law somewhere. So I don't know where that timeline is, whether districts do, but I need that to be able to come to these meetings informed with all my questions answered and to vote on stuff properly.
And that actually is, that will be a topic of discussion at the retreat. So if we don't hit it exactly, if we don't address all of the concerns, by all means, that'll be an open dialogue. So that would be a great time to discuss your concerns on that area. Is that it for board member report?
And then is that on? Yeah. I don't know, again, if this is the time to address it, but I talked with maybe Dr. Blackburn, and I think I don't know. Other districts have a slot on the agenda, like a standing open slot for board members to add things. I would like us to look at that, and maybe that's, again, a retreat topic, but I think it's important and gives us a little bit more leeway. So that's my 2 things.
Very good. Thank you for that input. Mr. Craig, board member report.
I don't have anything.
Mr. Ziegler, board member report.
Thank you. I agree, Tina, about the agenda changes. Just to let you know, this has been a discussion many years in the past, and the practice is that there should be no last-minute changes unless they were critical to, like an appointment that needed to be done right away, or a contractual because there was a date issue and it had to be done at the last minute. Somehow that has slipped. I agree we shouldn't have these last-minute things. I thought that was being even further enforced by the fact that Dr. Blackburn had a great idea that, hey, let's bring the agenda to the board 2 weeks ahead of time, a week before it goes to the public. That gave us that week, I thought, for those adjustments. But yeah, the last minute ones, because I'll be honest with you, if you make a change in the last couple of days and somebody doesn't exactly point it out to me, I've already read the agenda, I've already decided what I need to do, and then something pops up and I didn't know it because I don't look at it every day. Something you have to, and to say, well, yeah, you get a note of it, the change in your email, it just says in the email it's been changed. And if every time I get a change by email and I had to run back in, sometimes too many emails, sometimes I don't see them. So the last minute, we should have that conversation. As part of my report, thank you to everybody who attended the healthcare center ribbon cutting. Awesome event, and I made a statement this morning. I want to make the statement again. It really took some stars aligning to get these healthcare centers up and running for our employees. And again, the stars, our first 2 stars, is our Chair, Misty Belford, and John Craig coming on the board and really caring about saving money and doing more for employees. Thank you very much. Mr. Langdorf taking control of comp benefits and being so analytical as you are and saving us. And a lot of people don't realize he has saved us countless millions over the years in his diligence in insurance. Thank you very much for being one of the stars, and Dr. Blackburn for coming on board and really caring about employees and making sure we do all that we can do. So that's been great. And Mr. Langdorf told me that our first month operational as healthcare centers, that even with the holidays, 88% utilization, which is amazing. And as a result of that is why you saw on tonight's agenda 2 requests for going forward with the other 2 at the same time, because the acceptance has been so high, and the next 2, one north, one south, are going to be different populations. So we firmly believe that they're going to get ramped up as soon as they open. And this morning, thank you, Mr. Langdorf, for reporting to us that on the survey of those that used the centers, a 97.8% satisfaction rate in the centers. That's fantastic. So it sounds like everybody's happy. Central Florida Public School Board Coalition, I had chaired our first meeting earlier this month. And one of the initiatives I want to report to the board is we had some further discussion on school grading systems, which of course is one of the legislative items that is being brought forth and championed by our school superintendents across the state. I was very happy to know that they are not only advocating for something better, they are actually formulating a plan, what they're going to call a rating system as opposed to a grading system. And so the superintendents already have that in the works. Dr. Barbara Jenkins, the superintendent of Orange County, also the state superintendent of the year, is on top of working with a team to come up with that rating system. And I asked if she would then head that up also on behalf of the coalition, and asked the coalition that if the superintendents bring us a rating system, if that coalition would be willing to accept what the superintendents recommend and put forth Central Florida Public School Board Coalition rating system for the reason of making a statement. The Central Florida Coalition, in my opinion, has kind of been putting together a legislative agenda, but not really having a lot of meat behind it because nobody really knows who the coalition is. There's really never made a statement. We discussed the fact that this coalition doesn't really speak as a single voice. It doesn't have a brand. And everybody at the meeting was in agreement that it's time that an organization that represents over 1 million children in Central Florida, the I-4 corridor, needs to be a strong advocate and have a voice in education. So very excited that we got people stepping up to do things, and that the coalition is going to support the superintendents, who are the experts in the industry, into making things happen in Florida. Very exciting. One other point I want to bring up, I had asked for this to be put up for discussion. I wanted to clarify, we had an issue come before us where somebody questioned our dual enrollment students riding the bus while not being able to ride the buses to the Eastern Florida State College when the collegiate high school students could. That's been rectified. Thank you for staff for doing that. But I wanted to let the board know, since I was here when we cut corridor busing, I don't recall anywhere in the conversation collegiate high school busing being carved out as an exception. And I only bring that up because I see it as we talked about corridor busing, we talked about dual enrollment, and it almost felt like that was left out of the conversation. And since the board didn't say cut collegiate busing, I guess we don't have to cut collegiate busing. So I don't believe that was the intent of the board, although I wasn't necessarily a fan of the way the calculation was done for the savings. I had some questions about that, whether we should have really done that. But it's just interesting. It's more of a cultural thing of knowing to ask the right questions. That was not a question I thought to ask. That was not a question or conversation that came up. Oh, but because we weren't specific, it got to continue. Just a little bit of a lesson in history that hopefully we won't repeat going forward. Just wanted to mention that. Other than that, Dr. Blackburn, happy birthday, young man. You're not shiny and new anymore, but happy birthday.
No, not shiny, not new.
Mr. Susan. board report?
As I said before, I spent a lot of time, 4 days last week in Escambia County, looking over this PAR program that they call the SMART program. It's in different variations throughout the state. I see it as something that is absolutely amazing as a former teacher, and I think that it's something that we should definitely take a look at. I've never seen the collaboration that was going on in that room as I have in this school board. And when all groups see it, they were all in. And what I'd like to do is put together a presentation for you guys on it at the board workshop so you guys can kind of see what I was talking about. The other thing I'd like to do is PGPs drive me nuts. We're getting inundated now that Dan went ahead and sent out an email with all of our friends from around the county saying, so I would like to, at that board workshop, also discuss the timetable of putting an end or what it looks like to the PGP process. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And happy birthday.
Thank you.
I will be brief on my board report, if you even want to call that. Mr. Ziegler, I apologize that I did not add the corridor busing or the dual enrollment busing to the agenda. In my mind, it seemed to me like it was resolved, so we didn't need to add it, but I should have checked with you to ensure that you felt it was resolved before I opted not to add it. So I do apologize for that. We have one more discussion item on the agenda tonight, and that is the master board training. I forwarded out to you all the information from FSBA with a request if you would like to have it added to the agenda for discussion. I would be happy to do so, and Mr. Ziegler indicated he would like to have discussion around that. So I actually am going to turn it back over to you for discussion on that issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was fortunate to be part of the master board training when we did this many years ago. I found it to be extremely beneficial in learning how to function in a sunshine board and how to communicate through actions and desires and what's important to us. And it really taught, and I guess the important thing was, maybe more important back then than it is now, it taught you how to really work with people that maybe you didn't quite get along with or work well together with. I don't think that's an issue. I'm really happy. I'll be honest with you, I'm ecstatic working with the four of you up here. Even when we disagree, it's very professional. We get along great. But it's just one of those great team building programs that really help you be more productive. Can we possibly be more productive? I don't know, but I believe in professional development. I believe that we have to, we do it for our employees. I believe we have to practice what we preach, and there's limited professional development opportunities for boards. This is one of them, and I think it's a great program. I support participating.
Comments or thoughts from other board members?
This is just a discussion.
Yeah, I was just I couldn't remember the dates.
The question asked by Ms. Duskovich is the dates, and it actually depends on which one we attend. So there is one April 6th and 7th in Howey in the Hills, which would be our closest. There is one May 4th and 5th in Gainesville.
Do we usually go as a board? Do we go as a board, or?
I'm
I
sorry.
recommend that. Please, just say it.
I ain't going to the swamp.
What did you say?
Do we go as a board, or we
Yes.
decide individually, and 2 go and 3 don't? How does this?
The requirement for the master board training per FSBA is that the majority of the board attend. And the superintendent. Majority of the school board members and the superintendent, did you hear that? Must be in attendance at all training. Mr. Craig, I think you had comment.
Just had a question, you probably know the answer. Are there other professional organizations that give, well, I know there are, but have we looked at any other organizations that give professional board training? I know there's other organizations. Have we looked at those? Have we looked at relevance and cost?
I have not looked at any others. I would certainly be happy to examine some others if anyone wants to bring that information
Okay,
forward.
I will do that. I will do that.
I think we can certainly have that discussion. There is a deadline of February 15th in order for us to determine that we would like to participate in the FSBA Master Board training. I believe we have a meeting on the 14th. So theoretically, if we wanted to examine some other options for board training and share those amongst ourselves as information, we can't have discussion around them because that would be a violation of sunshine. But if you all wanted to explore board training opportunities and distribute that information out to the board, then we could have discussion at our February 14th meeting and make a determination. Unless there is sufficient, if any of you just truly do not have an appetite for doing this, or if the majority does tonight, then we could move forward on it, but.
John, you say you know of other organizations that do this for sure?
Oh, certainly.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
there are
let me see
others
my
out
options.
there.
But, to me, it would be you'd have to look at the relevance to what we do.
Correct.
Oh, they're not specific to school board
It
training?
may not be
is what you're saying?
specific to
Ah.
school board, but they might be specific to governmental entities that deal in sunshine. And anyway, I think it's worth, if we're going to look at a professional training opportunity, we have to look at you have to open the aperture a little bit and look at everything.
I like
Right.
choices.
Right. That's a good point. Relevant to being a sunshine board as opposed to the board of a large corporation or the board of a charity. There are different types of trainings.
So it sounds to me as though we'll all do a little bit of research between now and February 14th, share any potential recommendations that we would like to bring forward, and Matt will follow. All right, very good, thank you. And I believe, Dr. Blackburn, that brings us to the superintendent's report.
I had a 60-minute report planned, but in the interest
Woohoo!
of time.
Take a break.
Looking forward to the ABC Awards tomorrow night, King Center, to represent our employees or to recognize our outstanding employees. I believe 7 o'clock showtime.
Correct.
Tomorrow, King Center.
That's it?
That's it.
That's it.
You're ready to celebrate your birthday, aren't you?
Yeah, no birthday dance, no song.
No. We're too old for that.
All right. There being no further business, this meeting is now adjourned.